No, it's all right.
5:32. I'm calling to order this city council workshop in the city of Bandera. We're at 511 Main Street on Thursday, August 19th, 2021. All council members are present. Keely is here tonight acting as our city secretary. We've got Matt Lewis and, excuse me, Linda
Hubble.
Thank you. Hubble, a local name, by the way. Here representing Simplecity. With that, we'll move on to the workshop. Item 2. A, discuss character district map and review and identify place types by character district for the comprehensive master plan. Take it away, Matt.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Matt Lewis with Simplecity Design. We are very excited to be before you all tonight to introduce you and gather policy direction on the comprehensive master plan drafting as well as the place types. Tonight we're going to go through a series of slides. We're going to try and keep it at a level that is not nerdy and technical, and when we get to that level, just raise your hands and say, I don't know what you're talking about. But these elements are really critical to the success of Bandera and maintaining Bandera, protecting and preserving our environment. And we are excited to bring this before you all tonight in the community. Daniel Burnham was one of the original city planners of Chicago, and he said, to love one's city and to have part in its advancement and improvement is the highest privilege and duty of a citizen that we can be. Already? Darn it.
Oh, you know I'll tell you. Go to the blinds now. Thanks, Tony.
I've spent my career. Oh wait, no, this way.
Go ahead.
So I spent my career as the Development Services Director for the fastest growing cities in the entire United States. From 2004 to 2016, I was running fast growth cities, the fastest growing cities in the nation. And when we got here and understood what Bandera strived to accomplish, it sent us back in a reset. We understand how cities work, but we really had to reel it back in and say, working with Bandera and understanding your resources and what you're aspiring to become, that was an important check and balance back into us. I also want to introduce Linda Humble, my partner in crime with the drafting of this plan and one of the Simplecity Design team members. Do you want to do a quick intro, Linda?
Sure. I have been involved in local government for about 30 years. Very passionate about placemaking. I started off as a part-time receptionist and worked my way up through to the chair of city manager. I understand cities uniquely because if it was broke, give it to Linda. She'll figure out how to fix it. And I'm going to date myself a little bit. I've actually rebuilt budgets by auditing accounts payable files old school before computers. So I really do inherently understand how government works, how it interacts and the process and the systems to build great places. And it's something that Matt and I are really passionate about. This has been a really fun project. It's been an intellectually challenging project. We've listened, and I hope at the conclusion of tonight that you tell us that you've been heard. We have worked very hard, the next slide, to gather input. We've had a number of community meetings. We have sat down individually and visited with citizens, trying to really understand what makes Bandera tick. We were concerned when we got here that you had a comp plan previously that nothing had happened with. So tonight, I hope that you hear some of the things that we've factored into the plan so that this one doesn't sit on the shelf. This one is something that's exciting, and for a community that prides itself on being a 50-50 community, we hope there's an awful lot y'all can agree on in this plan. So we're going to see if we heard you tonight and if we got it right. I want to kick this off with a story. I grew up in North Louisiana, Monroe to be exact. Monroe has a lot of traffic that comes through on I-20, and one of the major corridors into the community is 5th Street. And we had a columnist that would write a column every Sunday in the News Star World. And one Sunday, she wrote a story about a toilet at the 5th and and Pine, a blue toilet to be exact. So all of us were thinking, the blue toilet at 5th and Pine. Well, what is at 5th and Pine is an outdoor RV storage. Louisiana's Sportsman's Paradise, and this outdoor storage facility was envisioned to actually hold boats and RVs. What it ended up being was a construction dump site for the local contractors. And so one of the local contractors had actually rented the RV stall at the corner and promptly put a blue toilet. Now the moral to this story is that we had lived in the community with that blue toilet for so long, we no longer saw the blue toilet. So Monday rolls around and there's this long parade down 5th, and we all stop at the corner of 5th and Pine and look over there and say, yeah, sure enough, there's that blue toilet. Who would have thunk it? And the whole point of that analogy is we hope that we are going to show you Bandera and it from a different perspective. Sometimes as locals, we no longer see what is there. Much like us as locals in Monroe quit seeing that blue toilet for all the tourists that came through. And that's really relevant as we talk about the green print to the blueprint. Time and time and time again in all of your meetings, we heard that your comp plan needed to be set around the natural setting of Bandera. Had to protect the natural setting of Bandera. It meant different things to all of you, but really what makes Bandera special is the natural setting. You think about how your town was actually developed with the early settlers, nestled in the Medina River. A lot of your tourists come to be a part of the hill country. So we were challenged to begin to think about, okay, what does the natural setting look like? And how do we protect that? So we had a very long conversation and wrote the comp plan around a green print, blueprint philosophy. And that's important in this context because we want you to study the comp plan when you get it in a couple of weeks. And think about it not in the way that you would normally read a comp plan. As I said, I've been doing this 30 years, and I wish I had $1 for every comp plan I had read. But I will tell you that this journey that y'all have embarked us on challenged even the way we see comp plans. And so when we begin to put together the natural settings, that is the green print. That is the hydrology, the topography, the soil, your wildlife. So we went back and really peeled back the layers, and Matt's going to explain in just a moment how we did that. The blueprint represents everything that went vertical on the land. One of the things that's very interesting, and we say this with love and affection, so I hope it doesn't offend you, but when you told us to keep Bandera, Bandera, what we came to appreciate, and one of the elements of keeping Bandera, Bandera, is you're very eclectic, yet nonconformist. And so, that's a nice way of putting it, isn't it? Yes, ma'am. And so what that really means is that you're unique. Everything about Bandera is unique. You're not going to find tract development here. You're not going to find things here that you find somewhere else. Well, that was very important in the blueprint because Matt's also going to take you on a journey, and we've talked about your DNA analysis before. Well, now we're going to really hone in on why that matters. Because our charge was to protect the natural settings and to keep Bandera, Bandera. And so we've worked real hard to do that. And in the context of the blue toilet, we hope that we introduce you to Bandera tonight so that you see Bandera in a different way. And you go, oh, that's absolutely correct. And the reason for that is this. If we've done our job and we've done it well, this comprehensive plan will not go on the shelf. It will be a document that will live long after we go. And when you have development come, and I appreciate and we've worried about, y'all don't want to grow, you want limited growth. Even when you don't want change to happen, change must happen in order for things to stay the same. It's just going to happen. So what we want to arm you with are tools that the development community understands what keeping Bandera looks like. Here are the rules. And if you build this, you're welcome. If you don't, you probably ought to go somewhere else. And no is always an acceptable answer. What the law says is you can't just arbitrarily and capriciously say no. So we hope that we have built a comp plan that respects your green print and blueprint, and we hope that we've married some development codes to it, so when you have a developer come in, you can go, here are the rules, this is exactly as a community what we want. They will be welcome. If they don't, and you have to fight that, this will be a fight you can win, because you've been clear in your vision, clear in your intentions, and being clear in how that might manifest itself. So with that context, let's get started.
So, after hearing the community conversation and the direction from the community, the first thing that we did is we created maps and base layers to understand the topography and the interesting character of this hill country town. This was one of the most striking graphics. We sat in our office and just stared at this and started to look at where the settlers built into the Medina River's little peninsula, and they built this perfect 335 foot by 335 foot grid, perfectly laid into that. And you can see where they integrated the hilltops. You can understand where things started to become a reality. We then went back and started to study what we had already done through the DNA analysis. And what we discovered is this community was laid out in town lots. Town lots were given to the builders that were building the Shaker shingles in this area out of cypress. And so they were building cypress shingles, and they created town lots. And these town lots were in a uniform pattern that filled up these 335-foot blocks. This has been here for 140 years in the same configuration. There have only been 13 replats done in this community in 140 years. Well, and when I was in with Hutto or San Marcos or Austin, we would have 13 replats on an agenda every council meeting, every planning commission. That says that you all don't like change. What we started to hear is the resonating voices of the community today was prevalent back then, and it helped us build these scenarios as we continue to go forward. So we started to analyze the neighborhoods and see how they function, these different areas. If you recall the DNA analysis, which you all have, it should be posted online. We also did a presentation at the 11th Street Cowboy Bar of this as well. What we picked up is the different neighborhoods and the different areas in the community function really differently. And they have different services, and they provide different housing types. This eclectic mix is what makes Bandera Bandera. We had to go in there and extract what we call the DNA. It's the physical and numerical patterns that make these places up. It is how wide the streets are, which is 55.5 feet. How the blocks are, well, they're 80 by 100. How far the buildings vary, well, they vary from 400 feet back to zero lot line, right? And so all of these characteristics we had to write into development standards, and that was the foundation which we began. So that allowed us now to go ahead and overlay the green print with the blueprint. What you'll see here are the building patterns. You see the watersheds, you see the floodplains, you see the river. The orange boundaries are watershed boundaries, and it shows you where hilltops are. It shows you where the high points are, and it shows you where there's slopes. It shows you where the topography is. And what we noticed as we started to analyze this is most of the buildings did not go in the center of the lots. They went to the highest contour line adjacent to the lot. And in fact, some of the buildings are over lot lines. Some are in the middle of right-of-ways. Some of them, they're all over the place. So it provided us a real challenge to keep Bandera Bandera, because we're used to having some standards on that. And we were able to resolve that, which we'll get into a little more details later. But what you'll notice here is the settlers that originally built here did with clear intention. It was like they were well ahead of their time. And they did not have the tools or the resources that we have today, and yet they were emulating patterns that we wish that we would have stayed on the trajectory with. The other thing that we notice is we can see Bandera from the 1800s to the 1900s to the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 2000s, and you can watch the environment transition and change throughout this community by the development patterns. And those development patterns are what make us feel something. They aspire something to either feel comfortable or uncomfortable. And those details matter greatly. And that was the foundation at which we began to put these components together. We had now had knowledge that we had heard from the community, the knowledge that we gained through our analysis. We created geographic information systems of all of these details, which basically is a system that lets us run analytical data on the patterns. We then used our experience to connect those dots to create the Bandera, and then we really had to break our mold and get creative with the information to make it local. And so tonight we're going to present you with some of the key elements of Bandera 2040, True to Your Roots. It is our integrated 21st century comprehensive master plan and development policies. This is a very exciting time period, and the fact that you all are going on this journey is a celebratory journey. You are providing an opportunity for this community to correct its path and do a course correction to maintain the Bandera that we know and love, and to put in the tools in place to protect it for the next 100 years. This is a very important journey we're going on. So we started off by reviewing a snapshot of the existing conditions, the government type that you have, employees, sales tax, number of building permits, just to get a snapshot of the community. This is a very long journey, so I'm going to continue to go through. In order to protect and create Bandera, we believed it was extremely important to form character districts. Bandera is made up of a series of characters. We're all characters in our own right. Character districts are extremely important to the patterns of the future, and I'm about to introduce you to what would be your comprehensive master plan character districts. And we're going to go through, first just show you a map of the character districts, and council members, you have a printout in front of you. I'm sorry.
One of the things that I want to elaborate a little bit on with the character districts, because they serve several purposes. When you really process keeping Bandera, you have to appreciate that a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work. And so part of our challenge was to peel back the green print, the blueprint, to determine the characteristics and where they were different. So the character districts, in our opinion, are really the differences within your community. And for instance, when we were having our public meetings, we spent a lot of time talking about Highway 16 out here. We spent a lot of time hearing about your history of trying to do a Western Trails overlay that was very contentious. Well, the reason for that is that there are 4 character districts now on Highway 16. And as we go through, we're going to show you how they change and how they're different. And the reason that this is important is that in order to be eclectic nonconformist, you have to respect the character that is required for that. So these character districts have land use relevance, they have culture relevance, and then they also provide relevance for communication. Because now you can communicate specifically about certain areas of your town that you need to protect, the culture, the green print, the blueprint, and it's a more defined boundary. And so what we've done is we've attempted to standardize your development code, but in order to respect your uniqueness, some of these character districts have special standards in them. And that's the way that we were able to protect your history and your heritage and keep it unique. So I don't want this to just be a land use concept in your mind. It really is the character of your community.
So with that, we had formed 7 character districts, and we're going to go through each of the elements of the character districts and why they're important. But you can see how they lay out. And what we would love input on are the district names. Did we get the boundaries correct? Are there any glaring issues where, hey, this boundary should have come over here and included this? And once we go through the individual components of the character districts, it'll probably help you solidify how that works as we go through this.
One of the things that's really interesting about your character districts, and again, this is the blue toilet analysis, we're showing you your community in a different way. The river district takes up about a third of your community. And a big chunk of the river districts in the floodplain or the floodway. So you're not going to see a lot of building happen in the river district. Your settlers district is your residential component. And by design, it's low density. It is the original town lots. So if a third of your community is river and a third of your community is settlers, then there is a third of your community that will generate the fiscal sustainability that you need to essentially protect the viability long-term of Bandera. And that's important because the trading post, and we'll talk about this in a minute, is the property that HEB owns. So that's an area where real commercial development could happen, could add real fiscal sustainability to your community. It's also where development can happen that could ruin your community. It's the coin with two different sides. So we spend a lot of time on that, but that's 7% of your total land area that could add wealth and manage your tax rate and help fund some of the infrastructure challenges that you have. So when you think about the character district, your outpost, Heritage Bend, Trading Post, Gateway is your commercial corridors. Those are going to be the areas where your industry is, your commercial development, or future development lies. And that's really important because the other balancing act of this is not only protecting who you are, but creating fiscal wealth to sustain yourself long term as you grow.
Now we're going to go into the individual components of the character districts. This is the Bend district. I mean, and if that graphically doesn't say why it's called the Bend, this is where 173 tie in, the Medina River crest, as well as 16 goes out and in town. The Bend is the north gateway to town. It's where several developments adjacent to the Medina River. I'm sorry. It's, you know, some utilizing their natural settings and some not. It's where service centers lie, where the community goes.
One of the things that's in the highlight is the redevelopment of this. You know, not to name names, but I'm going to. I remember Rochelle sitting in a meeting and talking about coming to Bandera as a young person, and the number of owner-operator hotels and the local flavor that used to exist. You have that in the Bend. And you've got a beautiful setting along the restaurant of the Brick. And so there's real redevelopment that could happen to anchor the north end. That's Bricks. Did I get it right?
Brick. I was teasing.
Oh,
Sorry.
my Southern English kicks in. Y'all have
He likes to be referred to as the brick.
The
I'm sure.
brick.
I'm sure you are of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So you think about the Bend anchoring the north end of town when you have the downtown, the Heritage anchoring at the other end. You can then begin to see the distinct personalities of Highway 16 that the community has and what the flavor it begins to offer individually.
It's also where everyone generally has to go. It's where the grocery store is, the cemetery, the post office, the hardware store. So the local services are really provided in this area. And it's also just a beautiful setting. So that's the vision for this, is to combine that natural beauty and the integration of the existing infrastructure to truly achieve the potential that that district has, to create that cohesive, walkable environment from the river to North Main. This is the area where it falls off, but it has great opportunity to incrementally reconnect that, and to continue to use the Bandera short blocks, the 335-foot blocks. And so we talk about that. This also provides that transition area, as Linda was saying, from the auto-centric environment to the more pedestrian-oriented, scaled areas. Next, we have the Heritage District. This is your core downtown area, and it's a 4x4 block of areas. It's the original historic past. It's where residents have been gathering since the arrival of Bandera. The development patterns there happened before they had zoning, before they had building codes or any of those other characteristics, but it is the elements in the built environment that best represents an urban setting, if you will, for what urban looks like in Bandera. And that is the scale of maximum density that you would see. We talk about intensity and density, and this is your most intense area is with regards to the building footprints. It's the most formal environment where the buildings come up to the street edge. They have awnings over the sidewalks that create an outdoor living room, if you will. It creates this very definable space, and the buildings communicate to the street really well. The signage is hanging. It informs the passerby or what they're about to arrive to. The buildings are timeless. It's authentic. It's also where majority of the retail is. To the northern boundary is where the courthouse is. This is where the civic activities are, and it's also the iconic building of Bandera. So that also is framed within this district. The vision is to maintain the functionality of both the building form and its mixed commercial makeup. The area provides commerce to Bandera since its settlement. Many of the service industry workforce occur within this district, the workforce. And we're going to talk about workforce housing in a little while and the adjacency to this and why it's important. Buildings should continue to have those shared walls. There's some characteristics that we went in and really extracted that need to be emulated and put back in there. It's also where wayfinding needs to be happen so you can actually link people to places. So people aren't cruising around looking for parking. You direct them to it, they go right to it, they get out of their cars, they walk around, get on the horseback, or whatever the case may be. You've got to get them out of their cars and into this city.
Before we go.
Yes, ma'am, Tony?
Okay, I'm sorry.
sorry, go
Before
ahead.
we go up a heritage district, I just made a note. There's some pretty key elements along 9th Street, so I would probably move it from 10th to 9th out. And then there's also a block that's sort of includes the original old schools. So if you included like Pecan, Cherry, 8th and 9th, that block, I think you would include some really great older houses, and that would also, you can see the old school too from that angle. But I would add those two to the heritage district.
Also, Jordan's watching, so she should catch this.
Hi, Jordan.
Is that the input y'all were?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Gateway District, which is next,
Yes.
is interesting in this sense. If you start at the end of 16 in the Heritage District and you progress, the Gateway District is where the pedestrian quit mattering at all. It is very auto-centric, and that is really driven by the fact TxDOT owns the roadways. So those gateways are TxDOT highways into your community that function for the car, not the person. The Heritage District still factored in the pedestrian. It was still at a human scale. So there are 3 gateways, all driven by TxDOT highways. So they need to be coded for the type of development that would happen there that's very different than the way you would code for the Heritage District and the pedestrian elements. So that was one of the things that when we really studied the community, those were obvious.
It's also where you can identify places to establish beacons, welcoming signs. Commissioner Jared and I were having a conversation today, and he was like saying you could put cattle, statues along the way. Those types of things that are iconic to Bandera that could significantly let people know they're arriving into Bandera. So when they get here, the gateways are the key opportunity areas for that. We also majority of this, or 100% of this, is going to be in place type 5. The built environment needs to emulate that same type of pattern as well.
There's type 5 is heritage.
Yeah. The gateways into Bandera should make people feel the sense of arrival from the tourists to locals. When you're getting back to town, this like, yes, I'm back to town, I'm back in Bandera. That's a very important element. So such as wayfindings, beacons, landscaping, public art projects could be identified in this area. And then programming the open space in a way that draws people in and utilizing those areas in that manner.
The Outpost District borders the Heritage District. So if you start in the Heritage District and you go north on 16, the Outpost is the next section. It still has some characteristics that you would find in the Heritage District, but you can almost see the decade that it began to develop, and the car had a prevalent feel. It lacks the covered walkways, and so if you walk that, it's hot. Makes me walk even when I don't want to, and it's hot. So that's part of the feel and why we begin to break this particular district out, because we've heard from all of you that you'd like to make changes along Highway 16 to make it more pedestrian friendly. Well, the outpost has different characteristics than the gateway to the north and the Heritage District to the south. So again, you can begin to feel the difference in the character even as you go north on 16.
And just so you're aware, we're going to go back into these districts again, and we're going to talk about the actual development patterns that exist in them. Right now, we're just giving you a high-level overview of what the district is and the vision. So the description, it has the small block grid, it creates this great transition, and it has this ability to be a special area in between the real formal downtown core and the bin district, as she was saying, the eclectic building types. Gaps for workforce housing could be held in here, as well as makerspace, people that are making leather goods, people that are building saddles and boots, and things that emulate what we want to become as Bandera. So this area has a lot of opportunity. It has vacant lots in it as well, that are or vacant and underutilized lots in this district that really are. We wrote development standards that would allow for the appropriate redevelopment of those lots. And so we'll get into those in just a bit. The vision for the district is establish a place where housing is plentiful and a commercial and office residential mix is there. Supports people with a little bit of money, buying a little bit of land, building a little bit of house or a little bit of business. And that leads into a little bit of wealth. And that next generation, that's the biggest gift that we can give to that next generation, because we've coded them out to where they can't even afford to live anymore. We've got to build them back in so they can maintain their lifestyle back into Bandera. Next we go into the river district. As we stated, this is majority floodplains, but there are a diversity of items in there. The river district is, whether it's seen as the arms of the community, where it's wrapping its arms around you, or the lungs where you go get relief from the community and go walk down by the park. It provides that ability for people to slip away and recreate. Sit down there and drink wine with their friends on a blanket. Go horseback riding, which we see today. Skateboarding, fishing. People hanging out in hammocks, and today Linda and I worked down there all day. It was beautiful, overcast, and we sat down by the river and just worked. It's such a wonderful relief from the day to just go stare in the water. It maintains this rural getaway, and this rural lifestyle we heard quite a bit. So we continue to challenge ourselves to protect that rural way of living, and throughout this, that helps maintain that rural lifestyle. And it also maintains most of the floodplains and floodways. The Medina River in your natural setting is the key element that makes your natural setting, and protecting the waterways is really critical. And it can be done through bank stabilization, riparian zones, and so the river district forms that. And we'll go into some of the big opportunities in this area as well. We're almost there. The Settlers District. This area is predominantly low-density residential, and it is predominantly where the house form types of buildings happen. It supports non-residential uses with schools and places of worship. Parks are sprinkled throughout this. The way that the Settlers District was forms a complete neighborhood. It provides the ability for services within the area. You can walk half a block and get to a park. You can walk half a block and get to a church. There's places places of interest integrated in. It's not just all residential, and that is so classic to Bandera, and you don't see that in many communities. So the way that the Settlers District forms is really quite impressive. It's got large lots that make it feel more rural in nature in the community, and there are some smaller lots in there as well, but not super small. The smallest lot we found in the district was 40 feet wide, 40 by 100. And we'll get into this is going to be a policy question we'll have for you in a little while here. So the vision for the Settlers District is to maintain the residential district for future citizens to call home. As housing trends shift, it's important that the district be flexible to accommodate housing demands. As we go into the development standards, we're going to talk to you about what that means and how to be mindful to not over-program the settlers district with intensity. The last district is the trading post. And the trading post is home to the Bandera High School, as well as a major grocery store chain owns some property out there. It's the northeast entrance to the city of Highway 16. It's got beautiful landscape. Right now there's grazing cows, and you know, this area geographically is very close to the center of town. It seems disconnected right now, but with an appropriate network of streets that connect back in there, the Silver Stage is a stone's throw away. And you think about how close this could be. This area could develop in a way that allows those community members to get down there by golf cart, by horseback, by bicycle, by walking, by whatever the case may be. And it can be built in a manner that is not a series of parking lots that doesn't meet the intent. And we are writing the development standards to create a village-style environment out there for that area. The vision is of the trading post is where Bandera can maintain the integration of rural living with modern conveniences. Highway 16 provides plenty of space for horseback travel. Many people use that right away now, off of the road, to ride horses down there, and we see that quite a bit. Two services, nonetheless, which we think is absolutely important. And it also has the ability to connect across to the river as well. I put this thing on here about Walmart. Walmart is transitioning all of its stores, well, they're doing like 6 right now to test their model, into village centers. They're getting rid of their parking lots and building up residential into their developments. There's one going in Garland, Texas. They're doing these all over the country. And so it shows that national chains will be flexible in design and they will build these centers. And so that's an important note. So that is the snapshot of your character districts and how they fit together and why the boundaries are what they are and why the names are what they are. We do look for input if you want modifications. Councilmember Kuntz gave us some great recommendations. We will go back, analyze that, and if that's something we can bring back 2 maps for you to show you what that would do to the Heritage District for sure. Yes, ma'am.
Question. So, you know, it's mentioned often that the HEB owns that land, but that's the reason it's never been developed in the past is because it's notoriously floods. And so if anybody like that were to build there, they would impact the flow to other businesses. And so that's always been a question on people that have been around here for quite a while. That's always been a question on their mind on how would we defend that, because you don't want the water that's supposed to go in that area to go somewhere else and destroy people's land or property that's been there for years and years.
So the short answer is, since most of their property is floodplain, you allow them to build very dense on what can be built. And you heard Matt talk about the village cluster. And so what that would do is really allow them to maximize the space that they can build on. And hopefully they will take the natural setting that's floodplain and program it in such a way that the 364 days a year that it's dry, that it's a real amenity not only for their city.
It's about once every 5 years. We had a fluke once every 365 days, but that was like once 100.
So having looked at it, and Matt will elaborate, one of the things and the reason, and I appreciate the question hugely, because most communities are really anti-density. Well, the way that you're good neighbors to property owners that are investing in your community is you recognize you have to give something to get something. And so by really appreciating the density, and density done well is your heritage district that y'all all love, that you want. Well, it's the most dense thing in town. Mm-hmm. So you just let them build that again. And so we're going to be talking about that. I will tell y'all that this is the area we've spent the most time worried about. literally waking up in the middle of the night, and I'll call him, first thing in the morning, oh my God, I thought about this, and it's just nightmarish. And so we really have thought about how to protect your rural environment, but the trade-off is the community's got to be comfortable with very dense where it's built.
Yeah, and part of it is just, not necessarily we chose to protect the rural areas. There are so many areas that are flood prone, and, it impacts a lot more than most people think if we were to allow building there.
Absolutely.
And
If
it
you
impacts
look at-
all of our insurance and
Yes.
FEMA and all of that support.
The good thing is the property owner's not surprised by that.
Most of them are.
Aren't?
Surprisingly enough, most of them are.
I would be
They don't
surprised
know.
if they are, because they are so prevalent in rural Texas
Yeah.
that they can't not have
We've
encountered
constantly
it.
got people that are buying pieces of land on, on the river side that don't realize, they're like, what do you not think that hasn't been developed before?
That's my thinking.
Yeah, it's just sat there dormant.
Absolutely is.
Other than that, or the rest of you, can we just get some nods, we're close, on the right track? What we don't want to do is to bring this to you to adopt and you go, oh, wait, don't like this. So really, now's the time to give us feedback if we're not getting it.
Yeah, and we're about to go into the way that the zoning goes into this as well.
I'll just say, I love the conversation, I love the research, I love the pointed ways that y'all divided this, and, I think it's a great beginning.
Awesome,
Looks good.
awesome. Did we
Except
get,
for Matt's nerdy Walmart thing, yeah.
well, you have to give him a little bit. I've talked to him all day long about don't nerd out on this. And he can.
He did good, he just had the
And I'll
one.
show you how long y'all have been doing this, because some of your photos are old.
Yes.
Yeah, the hotel and the,
Yes.
yeah. So-
What about you, ma'am?
No, I think it looks good. I like it.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I concur, yeah, it's great.
Even the brick.
Even the brick.
Mayor?
The brick.
Awesome.
The
It
only,
took you a while to
I,
convince me, but I mean.
I would just say about Tony's comment earlier about including some other properties, that it would just depend on what the intended uses would be,
Right,
that they
right.
would match.
So once they got to settlers, I was like,
Yeah, that's what I was hoping.
Yeah.
Did that help alleviate
It
a
did,
little bit?
I still think I could probably argue some of those to go to Heritage, but,
Okay. And maybe when I get into the standards,
But
it will
yeah, I
help.
mean, it's-
We're about to get into that now. Now
but
we're
there's gonna be a buffer, those are kind of on the buffer zone, so,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah, got it. Yeah.
Okay,
No
well, we'll
worries.
put a big check mark here. That's good. So we're gonna move now into place types.
Now we're going into the place types. And this is the overall place type map. This would become your new zoning map. This would replace that map that's on the wall back here. And so we've consolidated all of your zoning districts into 6 zoning districts, if you will. So we have nature, which is P1, it's natural, you go in, you go out. There's no human settlements. You'll notice the graphic has no houses. Those orangey, peachy things are structures. Next you go into rural. It's where lands are sparsely settled, and it's where humans first start getting built into the environment. And the environment is less formal, and so
Rural.
and
Oh, yeah,
yes.
sorry.
And then you have neighborhood. Well, we know what neighborhood is. It's where you start to get some orderly patterns. Your lots lay out in a more orderly manner. Houses go on lots in a more orderly manner. Then you have P4 mixed. This is where you start to see house form commercial or small buildings and commercial start to get integrated in. They're not
Commissioner?
overly intense.
That's your transition zone, P4.
I see it.
This has been the transition from the residential to your core, which is your downtown. It's the most intense. It's where the buildings take up 100% of the lot. It's where the parking is supported by on-street parking, separate parking facilities, or in the rear of the buildings. So those are the place types, and we're going to go into some of those details. And here we go. I actually have this. Land is left in its natural state. This is an example, the Medina River. Lands are usually unsuitable for settlement due to topography or hydrology, other such features. Rural, large lots, mainly sparsely settled, helps preserve the natural beauty and the agricultural roots of Bandera. Large lots, ranches, and dude ranches fill these areas. Neighborhood, this is what the neighborhoods look like. Wide eclectic range of building types and housing types, generally low density, detached housing, and it has civic spaces integrated in, owner occupied residential lots with one bunkhouse, maybe something that we're talking about producing with this, and we'll get into that as a policy question. And then adjacent to higher density uses. So ranch houses, cottages, duplexes, those are the types of things you'd find there. And this is the P4 mix. It functions as the transition area between the core. So I just went over these. And then your core regulates at the higher density. It's a very formal environment. It integrates the street grid throughout the area. It promotes a continuous line of buildings, critical to define that public frontage. We also are introducing civic space. Civic space are churches, they're schools, they're institutions, they're parks. It's where civic spaces, where the people gather. The courthouse square is a civic space. And so you'll notice on the place type map that you have orange. What that's showing you is that there's relief from and provided support to residential areas, to commercial areas, and you notice how the civic space is sprinkled throughout. It's the cemeteries. Those are wonderful integrations that the original settlers recognized, that those things needed to be here, and to not put them off somewhere in the corner, but they integrated them hardcore into the community, sprinkled throughout the landscape. And so we wanted to highlight and celebrate those spaces, and so they get their own place type classification. Furthermore, well, I'll go into that in a little while. So that's, again, putting the pieces together. Now we're going to go into the individual components within each of the districts and how the place types match within the districts. In order to come up with these place types, we did a direct translation of your zoning classifications, and so that no one lost entitlements, if you will. And your entitlements are your buildable allowances. And the areas that were residential, we coded residential. And so we coded exactly what you have on the ground, but what we did is we shifted the standards to emulate Bandera rather than generic standards that you have on the books today. Your subdivision standards, for example, call for 8,000 square foot lot minimums, 25-foot setbacks, 5-foot side yards, 25-foot rear yards, and you get this monoculture of place. Well, that's not reflected anywhere in Bandera. You don't have that. And yet, when someone comes to town, or someone's house burned down, or if something happened to a house, that's what you require them to build to. Otherwise, they've got to come to you and ask for variances and waivers, and so we are erasing that. And we're going to create flexible lot patterns. The building can be from 0 to 35 in some districts. And so what we're doing is we're writing the standards to emulate the patterns of each of the districts.
Eclectic, non-conformist.
Yes, and so that's a really important note as we go through this.
So to say this a different way, essentially when you adopt these codes, you're going to be rezoning every piece of property. That doesn't mean the zoning is changing. It means the words of how we're calling the zoning is changed. And so when the notices go out, that's going to be very important because Matt has commented, we are coding what is there. A lot of illegal uses exist today under your codes. We hope to remedy this. So when the letters go out, what are you doing to my property? The answer is we're allowing you to do what's there. Should make everybody happy, we hope.
But everyone in the town will get a rezoning notification.
We've been doing this a long time, we're not confused.
I know, you're not surprised.
There'll be
I'm
10,
being silly.
it's just a question of their name to protect the guilty, because that's how it goes in every community. We'll love to meet them.
Yes, ma'am.
How does this tie back, like civic space?
Civic space in this case is the cemetery.
Yeah, so I mean, every community has them. They're not property tax, you know, they're something, they're support to the system. But how do you regulate civic space sprawling? Because we just have over 1 square mile, and we have 2 entities that are sprawling and tend to take property tax rolls, houses off the books, or businesses off the books. And how does that zoning map back to, I mean, how does that
So if they are
resolve?
political subdivisions, you can't.
Can't regulate
They have the
it.
same authority you do, and they don't count.
Yeah.
The way you would regulate civic space would be with developers, and it's important, and we'll talk about that. Property that's typically located within 500 feet of a park has an increased property value somewhere between 15 and 25%. So from a fiscal sustainability standpoint, it's very important. People like green space, they like to have that place. But from schools, counties, cities, everybody comes to the table with the same authority, and you can't regulate that.
I'm really trying hard not to roll my eyes, but it's okay. No, it's just,
We
it's
don't
just,
make the
a-
rules, man.
no, I know,
It's
it's just an interesting concept, and it's just, it's so apparent in a community our size. I mean, it's really a big impact when just one property switches, so, thank you.
So in the Bend district, you'll notice that majority of it is place type 5, P5, and that, again, these patterns we're going to write for the different districts. But the place type 5 standards create the downtown area. So you start to see these areas rebuild in a manner when they're ready to rebuild, similar to the downtown urban core. And what this does is it does make them non-compliant right now. They'd be legally non-conforming structures, and the tools are going to be written in a way that allows them to incrementally rebuild, so that they can incrementally do additions, incrementally add a patio, incrementally add a pergola out, and so that it's not locking up your market. It's not saying, well, if you do anything to your building, you're going to have to come into full compliance. That would lock it up. We've been very mindful to allow incremental changes to occur. If and when they were doing more modifications to the building that's over a certain threshold, 50 or 60%, then you would be triggering full compliance. Full compliance is, can be achieved in a number of ways. It depends on the existing environment, but Gringo's is a good example. It was a gas station that turned that gas station into a plaza. Compliance, they've actually started to revitalize that in a way that would be more emulating to these patterns. So I just wanted to make sure we draw attention to that. It is not causing them to do anything, but if and when they do start to modify buildings, it would incrementally start to transition over time. The other thing that is interesting about the Bend is it has a variety of other places. So again, civic space is the cemetery. Place type 4 is an area where the transition starts to happen, and then it goes into residential down in the southern portion. Next is a heritage district. This is a really great balanced mix. You've got the place type 5 in the main street, which is where we actually, the derivative of the standards were extracted from those characters. It's a wide variety of lot types. It's a variety of building setbacks, if you will. Some are right against the street, some sit back 12 feet. It's a variety of how much the building takes up the lot. Some of them take up 100%, some take up 60%, 40%. And so we're trying to create that wide variety of allowances within that district. So again, you would have that same type of parameter for those districts.
So P5 can be dense and intense. So sometimes you will have a business not take up all of the lot, but they are a commercial or a manufacturing, so the use is intense. So you can think about P5 from a density standpoint and then an intensity standpoint. That's where your commercial, your workers, your economic development typically is.
The other thing is there are generally, since there's such a wide variety of lot sizes, we're not recommending lot sizes at all into P5. So if it would be regulated by the international codes. So the lot minimum would be as small as the international code. It's generally going to be about 16 feet, if you will. It could be 12 feet, depending on the built environment. And so you have that pattern currently in Bandera, and so we emulated that. And you can see it in place type 4 as well, has a wide variety of lot patterns, but the building context is different. So the area surrounding Main Street between 11th and 10th is that transition zone. And again, you can look on the existing map, and we coded exactly what's there now. That is already present. We just got the standards of those buildings and wrote those into the actual standards rather than the ones that were in there currently. Place type 5 is 100% filling the gateways. And again, when I was talking about non-conforming, this would make these non-conforming. So the Tractor Supply building would be legally non-conforming. And it doesn't emulate the patterns that would be created within this district. So as these districts redevelop, they would be transitioning back to a more urban feel like your downtown area. It is the ability for definition of the street edge. It's the ability to connect the building to the streets. And it's also the places where everyone's entering in, exiting out of town. So those gateways are really critical, but all of them receive the highest intensities and the highest entitlements. They have the most flexibility in the entitlements.
Matt, may I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am. Can we go back?
You're not mentioning uses at all, and that's very intentional, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We will get to that.
We'll have a policy conversation about that.
Okay, good.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And then you have the outpost district. It is place type 5 and place type 4. This is the area we were talking about that has vacant lots, great opportunities for workforce housing. A new housing mix could be integrated here. And it also is a environment that bridges the gap between the Heritage District and the Bend, where that could be a really beautiful set of 6 blocks there that are all place type 5. And then the tennis courts to the school are also within this district. Now we look at the River District. It contains place type 1 through 2, 3, 4, and 5 in civic space. It has all place types present in it, and most of the area is within the floodplains, but some of it's not. Some of it's on the higher land, and the entitlements on place type 5, some of them are present. You'll notice that the place type 1 is the natural setting. It's where the park is, and so we coded those in. So there's some residential lots down in this area in the northern end where there's some Airbnbs, and they were also coded in to this as well. And then you go into the settlers district. 71% is place type 3. That is just residential. That's all that means. It's residential. So place type 3 is residential, and it's intended to remain that way. You'll see along 12th Street, or 13th Street, I'm sorry, 13th Street, where a transition zone is established, but again, that was carried forward from the previous plan as well. And then down on the southern sections, it has some place type 5. Next, we have the trading post. Civic space is the high school, and place type 5 are the areas south of 16 and the large tract of land as well by the major retailer, Kosher. All right. Now we're going to talk about the organization of the code. And what we've figured out is Bandera, it focuses on its built environment by the patterns. And what we found that is important is the way that the frontage of the building relates to the street. And the way that that happens in different areas is the regulatory framework that we are offering as utilizing as a tool. In rural areas, the houses move all over the lots. The infrastructure out front is generally low cost. It's gravel roads, or it's chip seal roads, bar ditches, and so that interface would be the way that we code the rural. And the rural areas would have that type of interface. And then you go into the opposite area of P5, your urban core. It's where the buildings come right against the street, and there's a planter zone in the public frontage, and then you have the street. So what this is doing is dividing your public realm, which is your wheelhouse, it's your streets, it's your public right-of-ways, and the private realm. The private realm is private property. That's where the private property rights start, and the public side no longer interferes. And then you have the streets. Using this philosophy...
Let me give you some context on how to interpret, why what he says is important. I don't think anybody's confused that we were brought in because Tractor Supply came to town and they built something that wasn't Bandera. And so the question then becomes, how do we make sure that we keep Bandera Bandera? So as you grow and it's likely that national chains will want to come to Bandera. We heard a lot of conversation in our public meetings about we don't want to become National Chain Road. So we've given that a lot of thought. And what we can tell you is that national chains will conform to local standards when they exist, when they are in context with the comp plan, and they mirror your values. So that's what we've written into the comp plan and the development standards. The reason I'm standing up and telling you this, he's gonna nerd out on you. And you're gonna have to dig real deep to stay focused with him, because did I mention he's gonna nerd out on you? It's really important because this is where the rubber meets the road to keep your national chains from being national chains in Bandera. So for all of you that think that's really important, the words he's about to share with you, this is where it matters. These are the development standards that are going to distinguish you from having the, oh, that's such and such. How come it doesn't look like that in my town? Well, this is where that happens. So
formula buildings, Pizza Hut that looks like a Pizza Hut, Taco Bell that looks like a Taco Bell, a Best Buy that looks like a Best Buy. Those types of formula buildings would be coded out, and they would be building timeless buildings like you have here. That the building is a beautiful building, and the use inside could be the cowboy shop. It could be a coffee shop. It could be a bookstore. It could be a saddle maker. It could be. The use inside isn't really what is important. It's the way that the buildings fit and the way that they communicate what they are and the way that they function. And using Bandera's patterns, we extracted all of that character and put it in here, so that when a national retailer does come to town, you're not telling them no. You're saying, yeah, come on in and here are your standards. Come, and you're welcome, but you're going to build a beautiful building that emulates our town. You're not coming in and building a formula building, but you're more than welcome to come, and we're going to provide them that toolkit. The way that we're laying this comprehensive master plan out is like a children's book. It is going to be your character district, the vision and goals of the character district, the project list, your development standards, here's how you build. Here's your interface, here's your building types, here's your public frontages that you can choose from. Next page, here's the character district, here's what you can do, here's what we aspire to be, this is why we chose these tools. Here's your development standards, here's the buildings you can build, here's the way that it needs to work.
it will function like a marketing brochure for any of you that have gone in to build a house, and the builder said, oh, you want this house? Well, here it is, and here's all the things that goes with it. Each one of the character districts will literally have a 4-page spread. So when you've got a developer coming to town and it's in character district, you don't need everything, you just need the 4 pages. Everything they need, we'll have your vision, we'll have your goals, we'll have your regulations and what it looks like. Again, very clear. This is what keeps Bandera Bandera. You want to be here, you're welcome to, but this is how we do it here.
And the entire document is going to be graphic and then articulated in text. Graphics supported by text. And so all of these graphics we're about to show you are going to be built into each of the character districts with all of the individual components, with the building types. And so we're just giving you a flavor of them tonight, but when it's done, it's going to be all comprehensive. So now I'm going to get into building types and building placement. So instead of regulating off of use, zoning, saying you can't put your Blockbuster here, it goes over there. Well, Blockbusters aren't even existing anymore. That's why we don't like land uses. Land uses and zoning is an antiquated way of doing business. It also creates separation of use. It's creating negative patterns, and it's not Bandera. Those arbitrary rules that you had on the books are not what you have. It's not even reflective here. So what we're recommending is that you use place types and building types to govern. And we've come up with a series of building placements. These are edge yards. Edge yards buildings means that the building goes in the middle and you've got a yard all the way around. Does anyone have a yard all the way around their house? Like, this is a residential house, right? Edge yard buildings. Edge yard buildings are houses, duplexes, triplexes, and a bunkhouse. A bunkhouse is a backyard house that goes behind the principal structure. Some people call them granny flats, accessory dwelling units. We're introducing these to you all, and we're recommending they could be available in place type 2, 3, 4, and 5. And what that would do is bunkhouses could be built and utilized if, well, I'm not going to get into that yet. I'm not. I'm going to keep going. I know you're going to stop me. I can see it. We'll talk about bunkhouses
We'll
in
get
just
there
a
in a
bit.
minute.
But those are the types of buildings that have edge yard types of facilities. Yes, ma'am.
I just need to take a break, excuse me.
Should we stop for a
I
break?
didn't mean to announce it to everybody.
I don't mind.
No.
You want a break or no?
I
Yes?
don't want to stop.
We've been here about an hour, do y'all need to
Yeah,
smoke?
let's take a break. Okay, let people rearrange, because some people, or maybe we can get some more chairs. for some
6:38,
people.
we're gonna recess until 6:45. 6:49, I'm reconvening this workshop. Matt and Linda, you ready to kick it off?
You're whispering.
We're ready to keep moving.
Is the recorder on?
Yes.
Yes, Kitty said yes.
All right. What I want you all to really notice here also is, so edge yard buildings and place types are shown here. And so if you look at the associated blue dot of where they go, houses are allowed in place type 2, 3, and 4, but not place type 5. It is not intense. It doesn't have the structure that would be appropriate in your downtown. A house wouldn't fit on Main Street, if you will, right? Just a straight, normal house. Duplexes would be allowed in place type 2, 3, and 4, not place type 5. Triplexes are not allowed in your residential place type 3, which is your settlers district, if you will. They would,
Traditional.
your traditional. Triplexes would be allowed in place type 4 and 5. Bunkhouses, we're saying, would be allowed in place type 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is where we also need some policy direction, like, whoa, we don't want triplexes in place type 5. We only want them in 4. This is really critical as we go through. And there, beside these are examples of what a bunkhouse would look like, a duplex would look like, or what a house would look like. Next, we're going to go to side yard buildings. This is where the building is pushed to the side and the yard's on the side. This isn't a real common pattern here, but you do have a few, and they're mostly built in, I guess, southern, Charleston. Charleston is notorious. They were originally designed in Charleston. It's called the Charleston Side Yard House. It's where you have a front porch that's facing sideways and the doors face sideways. Sometimes at the street level, you'll notice on the picture on the bottom with the red roof, if you're walking by the sidewalk, there's a door there that makes the house look like it's a front door. But when you walk in the front door, it's actually just a front porch. Charleston side yard houses. And so we said these would be allowed with duplexes and zero lot lines in place type 4, and side yard house would only be allowed in place type 5. Again, the zero lot and those other ones would be out of scale, if you would.
Yeah.
Just a quickie to get an idea.
Next, you have rear yard buildings. This is main streets where the building's brought up to the front, the parking or the yard goes in the rear. Rear yard. The building types that would be supported with this are row houses, live work, loft, apartment, commercial buildings, and let me do that. Mixed use buildings, and then your bunkhouse, the rear buildings. So, row houses, it's a pretty intense building type. They are where you have shared walls generally. They usually happen in a run of 3 or 4, and they're, as an example up there, they usually have shared walls. They can be 2-story. We'd like to talk about heights, and we're not down in that level yet, but the next time we come back, we would say, what's the appropriate scale? Do you want any 3-story? Should we cap it at 2? Those are real critical things we'll get to as well and get direction from you. Row houses would be allowed in P4 and P5. Live work. This is a policy question we'll get to later, but I'm gonna ask it now as well. Right now in your,
Can I take a picture of this, or is this?
yes ma'am, go ahead. I also uploaded this for Keely, so she has these for you. Yes, sir.
Cool.
I'm confused, I'm sure. Row houses versus duplexes and triplexes.
Yes, sir. So row house is gonna be, they usually have shared walls.
Right.
They could be a single family house, so maybe one family that lives in one row house. And so they're individually owned. They also could be rented, it could be that type of thing as well. It's also why we put them into the higher intensity place types.
So let me
But the
try to answer your
duplexes are
question.
typically owned by one person and two people, and it's
That's
two
correct.
family.
Two
houses.
family.
So, in this instance, row house would be appropriate to provide workforce housing in P4, which is kind of your transition house, or transition area, and then P5. Heritage, if you think about the Fickle Pickle and the OST, they function like row houses. They share walls. And so it is, it's not unusual in very urban areas that are looking for live work for there to be this level of density so that when you're walking along the street edge, you don't know if it's a house or a building, and you don't care as a person because it feels okay. So the door will open out to the street, just like OST's door opens out to the sidewalk.
This makes me wanna start a scavenger hunt for y'all. Did you find the two houses that are separately owned but share the same roof line? Over the fence? Did you find that one?
No, I
That's a
don't.
good one.
That is a good
It's a
one.
scavenger hunt for
All
you.
right, it's our Easter egg we're gonna go find.
So there are two houses, they're attached, and there's a fence between
There's the
them.
same roof line and there's a fence.
Okay.
Does it have a red barn directly next door
It
to it?
does not.
Yeah.
It does, doesn't it?
A red barn?
Red building,
Oh, a red building.
the storage building
Yeah.
that's right there that nobody lives in.
I know there are two
I
owners.
don't think that's
Maybe
the
not,
one.
maybe
I
I'm
don't
the
think
wrong
that's the
one.
one.
Okay,
I don't remember.
I'm gonna go check that, that's great.
Okay, we have more than
I
one.
love
I know, I got y'all all
I
thinking.
think,
When we'll take a picture and send it to you, I'm a prize. So does that answer your question?
Prize though.
So it's not something that you would expect to see, but you could see in some of the vacant properties that you have, because one of the challenges that as a community you've asked us to address is workforce housing. So row housing could be a solution to that, so that as a person that is engaging in that space, again, it will fit the look without being traditional.
Live work, right now, you all allow in all of your zoning districts, as long as they don't put signs up. So we were gonna get to a policy question later, so we carried that forward now, just copying your policy that you allow it. So live work, we allowed in 2, 3, 4, and 5. Lofts, more intense building pattern, allowed in 4 and 5. So I don't need to go through each of them, but if you see something that flags, commercial building or an apartment building, and an apartment building is not a series of apartment buildings like the Oaks Apartments, if you will. That's one large lot with apartment buildings. This is where the building comes up to the front, and it's got the parking in the rear, but it's scaled within this block. So the apartment building scale, the development standard's writing at a smaller scale, so it doesn't overwhelm your blocks, if you will. We'll keep them in a smaller scale.
Did we answer your question? Okay.
And then mixed use building is where you would have a mixture of uses where, and this is a building type under the International Building Code, that's why we're calling it this. It's the way that the building is built must meet mixed use standards, and a mixed use building would be allowed in P4 or 5. It could be a shop house where you have maybe a little house above your shop, or you could have a little mezzanine overlooking your shop, that type of thing.
And that's really important, because back in the day, it was not unusual for somebody to buy property and build their store on the bottom and their family live up top. So to be true to your heritage, mixed use makes sense to put back in the code.
Next, you have courtyard buildings. A courtyard building is where the building takes up the entire perimeter of the lot, and the yard is in the center of the building. Courtyard buildings are patio homes. There's houses that build themselves in courtyard buildings, courtyard apartment buildings like that. There's a loft building, and then the side yard. So patio house, it's a small house, and it can go in 2, 3, and 4. A house can go through in 2, 3, and 4, and then all of the other ones are only allowed in place type 5. They're very intense building types, and so they would be restricted to place type 5 only.
And the key to this, just to reiterate, is not what's in it, but how it looks and functions through the creation of place. And so even with the intensity of the uses, how it sits on the lot, how it integrates with the public and private realm is really important. That's how you protect the uniqueness and you ensure you're not getting brand A, brand B. They have to conform to the standards in your place types.
All right, now we're going to get into the lot structure and the way that things are organized. And so if you think about the different place types, the intensity shifts, remember, from rural environments to urban environments. So in a rural environment, the house can move anywhere on the lot it wants to. It's just the way that the rural environment is. So we're not coding it fine grained. But when you get into place type 5, the placement of the building is really critical, and the way that it associates with the street is really critical. So the way that the plan would work is you would have a public frontage, and then you have a frontage line. That's the seam between the public property and the private property. It's where they mate. Every place has that. Then you have a build-to line. Your build-to line is the maximum frontage line. So the development standard would say, in place type 4, your build-to line is, let's say, 5 to 15 feet. So as long as you're within that range, you would be able to build your house or your structure within that build-to line. That's your private frontage. And your private frontage could be, we're going to get into there's a variety of private frontages we're offering to the developers. It seems more complex laying it out in this way than reading it as a book, but I'll explain it in a second. And then we're not saying you need any minimum side setbacks. We're going to let that be internationally code driven because of the way that you have already built. If we coded in a mandatory side setback, we would make a lot of your residential lots illegal because they move all over the lots. And so we're saying the International Building Code sets the minimum standards for safety. And the only reason you need that is for safety precautions. And so they are already established, so they don't need to be reestablished. Private frontages. This is where the private developer chooses the type of relationship the building is going to have with the street. And they vary by place type. A common yard, it's a front yard. That's a private frontage. So when you say, I'm going to come build my house, when they come and talk to Keeley, they come in, they're going to say, I'm building an edge yard, and I'm building a house, and I'm building a front yard. Well, there's your plan set. That's it. And so it's really like paint by number. Next person comes in, they would say, well, I want to build a house with a porch and an open fence. Well, that would be allowed. The next person wants to build a shop front. Well, those are not allowed in place type 2 or 3. They're allowed in place type 4 and 5 because it's an intense. You look at the shop front and what it looks like and what it feels like. So you would select, I'm in place type 4 and I want to build a building with a shop front. Then you have a gallery. A gallery is when you have a awning that goes over the sidewalk and then and it's got a second story on it. And so the building there that just got remodeled it's called a gallery, and they're really beautiful spaces. And a lot of old towns had galleries over the sidewalks. New Orleans, all of New Orleans has galleries over the sidewalks. It's 2-story. And then you have an arcade. Arcade is where the awning comes out and it terminates down with posts that frame in the sidewalk, if you will, and it's a formal environment. So you can see the drawing of what arcades look like, and so that's how that would function. Then you have your public frontages. Now it's your frontage for what the public standards are. So a rural frontage has bar ditches, chip-sealed roads. The road's generally narrow, it meanders. The trees meander with the natural landscape. It's not in an organized fashion, if you will. Then you go into neighborhood frontage. You start to see a little bit more formality. The trees maybe start to get formal, but it can also meander. A sidewalk would now be included sometimes. Sometimes they're not. We're not going to hard code sidewalks in because you don't have them. And I do think that's a good policy question that we should discuss as well. Yes, sir. Oh, no. So neighborhood frontage. And so it would function like a neighborhood street. Then you have a mixed frontage. It's what you have down 11th Street. Some of the buildings have sidewalks that have awnings or galleries over them. Some of them don't. They have open porches. And so the street is a mixture of types. And you go, and that mixture happens. And so when they come talk to Keeley, they can choose a mixture of street types because that's how a mixture of frontage types because that's how the street functions. And then you have a major frontage. A major frontage is very defined. The trees are 30 feet on center. They have alternating pedestrian scale lights on the alternating 30 foot on center. The sidewalks are a minimum square footage. And so the frontage requirements are very formal in nature. And it goes from a less formal environment to a more formal environment. And so when they come to do any changes, this is the frontage type that they would select. Are there questions about that? Is this resonating, making sense? Darcy, no? You want to talk about this more?
No, I'm just really confused.
Y'all can have her
Oh,
stay
you're
after.
joking. Oh, she's
Y'all
You're
can
staying
have
after.
her stay after school.
okay.
Well, just to summarize, it is a way of coding what makes Bandera Bandera and standardizing it so that you have to replicate it. Because if you don't, then you have to accept what the market will give you. And the more fine-grained your codes are, the more standardized you force them to build. This allows you to get what you have.
And allow
More
to
of
say
what we
yes.
have.
Yes.
Right, and it provides a wide variety of options without over-regulating. The whole intent here was to not over-regulate the things that didn't matter, the things
That's
that
all
will.
you had to say to get me on board.
It is focused on these minimum frontages, and really, all we're coding is the first 15 feet, and it's this relationship between the buildings, and whatever happens past that, it's not regulated.
And council member, that is so important to be able to articulate to some of these developers that you're gonna wanna tell no. There's a whole lot we aren't regulating, but what we care about greatly. And we have provided you the template, the menu, the cafeteria plan for you to be set up for success. So, I say that in this context. When you adopt this plan and hopefully it resonates with all of you and hopefully we've really heard what you had to say. I'm gonna challenge you to always ask the question when somebody comes to you to change this, why would you? Why would you ever change these criteria? Why would somebody come in and ask for a zoning request that you would say yes to? And we had this conversation last night with planning and zoning, and I want to share it with you today. Your comprehensive plan, if we got it right, is your vision. It's the natural setting, it's the rural intent, it's the things that keep Bandera Bandera. I hope all of you treat that with some respect as the city's Bible. It's the development Bible. And so if somebody wants to come in and do something other than what's here, it shouldn't deviate from your comp plan. The state law says that your comp plan has to be in compliance with your zoning. And when your zoning changes and it's not in compliance with your comp plan, you have to amend your comp plan. Well, that needs to be a moment for the community to come together and ask the question, is this really what we want? And there will be some things in your future you will, because we're sitting here in 2021 and we have no idea what the future holds. And y'all have come from wagon wheels to autonomous vehicles. And so over the course of that 150 years, lots of things are going to change. But it has to go back to the center of your vision and your values for your community. Does it add value? If it does, then the answer should be yes. If it doesn't, then stand firm in your values and say no, and know that you've got a document that's defensible in court for you to be able to say no. We don't offer a lot of regulations, but what we do, we're committed to. It's worth fighting over.
And the challenge is what is value? Everybody has a different definition.
That's
so
right.
as long as we've defined it as a community, then
That's right.
there shouldn't be a question.
And the philosophy, the way that we wrote this was predictability with flexibility. You have this, you don't have hard lines that say 25 foot, 5 foot side yards, 35, 0 foot front yard. We have it to where it's a range. We're giving you ranges in each of the place types, in each of the districts. You have a movable building envelope, because there may be a beautiful pecan tree where you say that the 25 foot mark is, or where the 0 foot mark is. And so what we did is we're providing them a wide variety of building types. So if they can't build an edge yard because of some special feature, they can choose a side yard, move the building over, still accomplish what they're doing. We're giving them so much flexibility, yet the community gets predictability because they know the patterns and the elements that are going to be represented at the time that they're doing development. And when we finish this, we're going to give your staff brand new forms with these elements on it, so it's a check the boxes, and so all your development forms are going to emulate this as well. It'll come back in and it will show them graphically how to utilize this.
And along that same line, if you have somebody that's coming in and asking for a zoning change, the forms are gonna force them to take themselves on a journey. They're gonna have to go to the comp plan, they're gonna have to acknowledge what the community wants and have to justify how it's value added. So it's not going to be made easy for them to just bypass the process and make it up. The forms will dictate the journey for them to make a compelling argument to come before planning and zoning for a recommendation and then before this body for a final adoption.
We also are introducing a wide variety of civic spaces additional to what you have, the churches, those types of things. Parks, so you have a large park now. Those are large regional areas, so they happen in place type 1, 2, and 3. And then you have a green. Greens are smaller parks that are integrated in neighborhoods, and they can be in more urban areas. So they happen in place type 3, 4, and 5, and we'll give you the dimensions of how these work. And then you have a square, courthouse lawn, happens in place type 4 and 5. Plazas, it's the most urban type of park that you have. And you have the Western Trails Heritage Plaza and Park, that's a plaza and they happen in place type 5 only, it's the most formal. And then playgrounds, we encourage them to be within a 600-foot distance from every residential lot. They're allowed in all zones, and so they're allowed everywhere. Our goal with this was to protect the natural setting, to keep Bandera, to preserve the rural lifestyle, to create a walkable, cohesive environment from the river to North Main, and to preserve your timeless character that you have here. We wanted to validate with you all that those things you feel and see within the plan that we've just gotten to at this point. I just wanted to make sure all of those elements are there.
Did we really address walkability in the outpost?
We're
Or is
gonna
that
get
coming?
to it in the policy.
I'm working, we're almost there.
Yes, we are.
So,
Before he gets into this, these three development patterns are going to speak to the ability to manage your floodplain, to manage your natural settings. Sometimes there are environmental settings, whether it is the topography of the land, maybe it is a canal, maybe it's a railroad track. These development types factor in the ability for you to preserve what matters and makes you unique. The worst thing that can happen is somebody has to bring in a dozer and cut down and blade off property to build. So the intent behind these development standards or development patterns that he's talking about gives you the flexibility to work within the confines of your environment, again, managing that natural setting with the characteristics that allow the developer to come in and maximize their development, so it's a win-win. It's a win-win for the community, and it's a win-win for the developer who has to make that ROI to be able to come to your community.
So up to this point, I've been talking about things that would happen in and around the existing blocks. Anytime you're not building more than a block here, everything I've talked about would be allowed by right. It means that they can come to town and come to Keeley and start pulling permits. It means that they would actually be emulating those patterns. These development patterns are when someone comes to town and they're building out something larger than a block. You're going to send them into. You have 3 development patterns that you can choose from, and this is when large developments come to town, or acreage developments. Well, you're going to send them into development patterns, and we're going to provide them 3 options of development patterns. 1, continue the blocks. If the landscape would allow it, then you would want them to do a traditional neighborhood development. That's the continuation of the Bandera building block. It's 335 feet, 335 feet. They can map out their own place types in the development. So they can allocate their own place types. They would say, we want a mixture of place type 4, we want some place type 5, we want some residential. And then they would be able to get that done with the development patterns. So That's, so I want you to think about this as, just think about large land areas getting developed in and around your town. And so that's where these would be applicable, and they would be able to utilize this.
And notice what is not present here, cul-de-sacs.
Yes.
So it is the traditional grid of Bandera that would be forced to be continued as a part of the transportation plan. So there are no loops and lollipops, no cul-de-sacs here, that is not Bandera, you don't find that here.
And we also provided a range of block types. So,
Which
one.
Oh.
By Silver Sage.
By Silver Sage.
Yeah.
Well, the residential development across from Silver Sage.
Well, one in this town does not constitute.
Yeah, you're right, you're
Let's
right.
get
you're
into a
right.
little bit more of what we've done with the, trying to limit that as well. So this is Bandera, and we provided a wide variety of blocks that they could utilize under this pattern as well. The next is clustered land development. This is where you preserve most of the open space and you clustered your structures into one area. And you can put them around a park, and it can still, they also have the ability to allocate place types. So at the time that they're doing these developments, this would all trigger a public conversation. This, when they're building more than a block, here it is going to go through the Planning Commission and the City Council for a conversation. So they would be allocating the place types in this development before a public process. You all would say, no, you're not building that many place types, you're only going to get this many. Or, hey, we want you to add some more of this because it's missing in our town. So y'all would have a say of how the developments went. You also would have the ability to allocate the appropriate development patterns on the land based off of topography, which we will get to in just a second here.
And cluster land development, right off the bat, develops with topography. So in your floodplain, you could anticipate a cluster land development as being the choice of the developer. It allows that density to happen because a lot of the property is not usable.
But it's still a grid.
Only if
Not
they
so
choose
much.
to.
Yeah.
Cluster land development, it typically is, and I'm gonna use a Bastrop example. Bastrop has a natural habitat, an endangered species called the Houston toad. And so in that habitat area, it doesn't matter how much land you own, you're gonna develop 1 acre, period.
And this is a federal law.
And it's a federal law. So in that instance, a grid doesn't make sense because you only have an acre. So it could be possible in some of your land, depending on its location, so much of it would not be developable that it would not make fiscal sense to put a grid pattern in there.
Where the
So-
cluster is.
That's right, so you build around the natural setting, and it dictates the development from transportation to drainage to the building types.
Like if it's floodplain or something like that.
That's right.
Floodplain or agricultural, that way you can integrate agricultural into the neighborhood. I mean, maybe someone wants to grow there's a neighborhood type called an agrarian neighborhood. It's like food production into the neighborhood, and it has a wide variety of building types in it.
I'm doing that in the
So
backyard.
we coded these types of
Like,
things
that's
to be
too Austin.
available for the development community when they show up. This would be one option.
People have been growing food here all along.
I grow food on my back porch.
And the last is a village center development. These are small. They're generally 5 to 20 acres development sizes, but it would be for new developments, and it is a more intense. Detached single-family homes would not be allowed in this development pattern. It would be a series of buildings, and it's where you preserve the most open space. So, the majority of the open space would be preserved, and the building types would be intense. And so these may go in one particular area. Maybe you say, well, we don't want this everywhere, but they go in here. Or maybe they fit in certain areas and you're like, hey, we like this, and that's a cool development pattern. Generally in these development patterns, the vehicular traffic goes in the peripheral of the development, and the interior streets are pedestrian walkways. And so you'll notice the buildings come really tight, and so we write the standards that allow for a wide variety of building types. Row houses, single-family houses, beer gardens. It's an intermixture of, it's a village. It functions like it's a self-containing village. It's just another option for a development pattern. Yes, ma'am.
Comparing the village to the cluster, because I'm feeling a lot of similarities, so what are the differences?
Cluster is more for residential.
Okay, and
so
this
you
is
would have
more of a mixed
residential,
use.
most of the time it's single family homes, detached, fronted on a common, green or a community garden or those types of things, have community centers built into them.
Okay, and I feel like I'm associating this with what I know as like a conservation neighborhood.
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay.
That conservation subdivision is another name for this.
Okay.
And what's great is the developers can hit the same yield. So their performers can pencil because they can hit the density numbers with their lots that they need because of the standards. They don't have to take up the whole land area to hit their numbers, and so their infrastructure cost goes down. The infrastructure they build is reduced, and so the impervious cover goes down, so your small area flooding goes down. They're very intentional, and it works really well in the geography that you all have. That's why we think it's really an appropriate one. And this too could also facilitate that type of thing, just a little more intensity. So in order to understand this, we started to really evaluate your city limits and your extraterritorial jurisdiction. In the extraterritorial jurisdiction, ETJ, you have the ability for land use regulations, transportation, and environmental under your comprehensive master plan. You have the ability to comprehensive master plan, transportation, environment, and land use within this area. You cannot dictate zoning. We have no say on zoning. But development patterns is an option. You can write those into your comprehensive master plan. So what we did here, these are about 80-acre circles. It represents a 5-minute walk to the center, a 10-minute walk across the entire boundary. So if you started in the center and went to the edge, that's a 5-minute walk. And what this shows us is that walking from the furthest city limit boundary north is about a 25-minute walk. If you're walking from the river all the way to the other city limit line, it's about a 30-minute walk, 40-minute walk. And what this is doing is, these are neighborhood unit scales. Generally, you can fit a full neighborhood development where everyone has access to daily services within a 5 to 10-minute walk. When we did this analysis and started understanding how Bandera laid out, you all have these fantastic patterns that helped us inform the standards that we came up with. And so what we wanted to do is understand what a transportation network may look like out into this ETJ. And I want you to first go back to the original first slide I showed with just the river and the topography. This was the most challenging thing I've ever done. I've worked in cities that I thought were challenging. This has been the most difficult exercise that we've ever had to do because of the relief and the topography and where the watersheds fall and all of the natural systems and where the highways were. But what we wanted to do is provide you all the ability to have a transportation plan out into the ETJ that would establish a mandatory street network so that if and when your town started to develop in those areas, you would have the ability to have some say-so with your transportation systems, and it would not become a bunch of cul-de-sac subdivisions that did not meet the intent of your plan. And this is what we had come up with. And so we utilized the Bandera blocks where they would fit. These are 335-foot blocks. And we understand that this would be pretty intense if this was your network. And so what we wanted to do next was, I gotta talk off this a little bit. This took us a long time.
Don't go too nerdy.
Okay, all right.
Thank you for bringing
Okay.
her, Matt. Don't go too nerdy.
All right, so we understand and recognize this is probably too formal. And so what we want to do is say, okay, well, let's back up a little bit. And what if we just said, let's look at the larger blocks. While your city built out with town lots at this 335-foot grid, a lot of American cities that use the grid is used all over America. Most cities that have a town square have grids, and they have this, generally they'll range. New York City has 600-foot grids, San Marcos has 200-foot block grids, but they're elongated. They're 200 foot on one side, 400 on another. They're elongated blocks. You all have perfect square blocks. In Bastrop, we discovered the farm lot. And American cities used farm lots originally, and one farm lot equaled 4 building blocks. And so if you look at the squares on the bottom, we started to just say, what if we built out at a 720 by 720 grid just for a network? And what this would do is allow the development community to say, hey, we understand what you're trying to do to preserve the land area and emulate the patterns that you have, but we would like to shift the street over here, or we want to move the street over here. It provides this flexibility where it's not so fine-grained coded that it's inflexible. It gives them a lot of leeway within a 720-foot block ranges that they could move their network in and around features that we couldn't see when we did this analysis. This analysis was, down into Google Earth. It was studying the maps in the GIS system so that we could understand how these pieces fit together. The red lines are the critical street network that some are already built and some function, and then the black bold lines are ones that we would recommend that get integrated into your overall transportation master plan. Having a transportation master plan on the books would trigger a conversation when the developer comes out and tries to build or plat a subdivision that does not meet your transportation master plan. It triggers you all to have the ability to say, hold up, we have a thoroughfare master plan, this road is on it and it's critical to our success. Or you have the ability to say, hey, we don't think that road's going anywhere, we're going to take it off our thoroughfare master plan. It triggers and allows a conversation.
It will be an appendix to the comprehensive plan that we bring you.
We're going to put this as an appendix.
Thank you.
Amazing.
We thought this was very critical, and we studied all of the land that we thought could receive development, and that's what this turned out to be.
Tony will sign off on that bill for that time.
Next, we went into policy questions.
It just looked like y'all followed the horse trails, but I could be wrong.
Well, that was awesome.
Deer trails.
The deer.
So at this point in time, we want to interact with you, and we've got a series of policy questions. And some of them are validations. We're gonna wage an argument as to why we think they're necessary, but one thing we've learned about this community is if you don't like it, you will tell us. So we are here to see if we got it right. So with that, the first one Matt talked about, which was live work. What we put in there is what you have suggested or we see on the ground, and that is that we keep live work in P3, P4, P5. And now we're seeing a huge shift nationwide with people working from home. That's just going to be the norm. So we just need you to validate, yep, we hadn't stepped out there too far, we expect that to stay the same. Great. Next slide. Uses versus places. Here is a pretty significant change from what you're used to seeing. When we took this journey in Bastrop, it was pretty eye-opening for me. The council went on a journey, and what we came to understand was that uses change. Uses change every day. There are businesses being developed today that we didn't know to think about 2 months ago. And a lot of things that we, and I've been here, I've been on this earth long enough, there are a whole lot of things that date me. The rotary phone, comes to mind. There used to be operators, and in 1980 they became antiquated. And so it's really hard to keep a zoning ordinance up to date when you're focused on uses. You spend an awful lot of time trying to put something in a box that doesn't fit. So what we have spent this evening waging is an argument for, if you can't see it, you can't smell it, and you can't hear it, do you care what is there? As long as it looks like Bandera, it interacts appropriately with Bandera. You've got ordinances on the books today that are nuisance ordinances. You have a sound ordinance, you have a smell ordinance, and you have code enforcement. So if I'm functioning appropriately based on the intensity and we don't have a use chart, do you care?
No. Thank goodness it's leaving.
You look like you're struggling.
So this is in all cases.
Miss, I don't like
all kinds of-
regulations, struggling with this, so I'm loving it. Let's go. Talk to me.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what you're not telling me. So,
So here's what I would say to you, because I'm gonna be just real honest, and I'm gonna tell you what I worry most about on Highway 16. And he and I will tell you, we've gone more than 14 rounds on this. I am scared to death that it will become used car alley on Highway 16. I was in Garland, if any of y'all have ever been to Garland in the Metroplex, Garland is car land. It was nothing but a row of used car lots. So I have come at him 16 ways to Sunday, and
And I
he's
say,
commented.
if they are bringing car lots, they're gonna have a bunch of beautiful buildings that these car lots are gonna be, and the cars are gonna be in the back of these beautiful buildings they're gonna build for y'all. That is not happening. They cannot achieve, it wouldn't pencil. Unless they built the buildings out and picking their frontage types. So they're gonna be only allowed in place type 5 just based off of the size alone.
See, he's writing it down. He's excited about creating a car lot. Thank you. That's why it matters, Matt.
Okay, so here's what I would say to you.
So wait,
So
I
here's
want to ask
what,
a question.
okay, but let me finish up with that. So here's what I would say to you, because I have argued this and I'm still willing to argue. If there are some specific things that y'all are concerned about, that's the beauty of the character districts. You can just code them out and then force somebody to come in and have a conversation with you that says if you're going to do it, you have to fix it in a way that it protects the very things that we want. So if there really are some,
Your Whataburger has to be maroon. I mean, that's a college station. The Whataburger is
the state
maroon.
legislature's not gonna let you do that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But, so, here's what I would say to you. If there are things that you are very concerned about, these are the conversations that we need to have. And we're willing for you to think about it. We can come back and have a conversation about this. But rather than regulating your entire plan about uses, I think you focus on what you're interested in not seeing. And then let's see if we have resolved for it in the building types. And if not, then in that specific character district, you just have a use chart that says these aren't allowed uses. And it requires approval from P&Z and council.
But I'm gonna again say, I believe that we have the development standards that are going to get you the built environment that you're seeking without having to regulate these uses. The uses, a used car lot is not going to be able to accomplish the goals that are required under this code and make it fiscally viable. Maybe they can, but the cars are gonna go in the back. It's not conducive to that style of environment. But, I mean, that's just
So
one
is this
example.
across the board in all place types?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So my only concern based on what citizens are telling me is that so the biggest struggle right now in our little town is a lot of our small houses are being used for small, short-term vacation rentals.
We're gonna get
We're
to
gonna get to
that.
that.
Okay, well,
That's a
let me just set this scenario, maybe we can talk about it. So my argument is always, okay, so if you can find a family these days that want to live permanently in the little houses that we have in town, then that will happen. But until you find, the families don't want that. The little houses in our town are not desirable for families anymore. For the majority of people, they want 12 rooms per person. You know, that's just what they want. So, but the older people, I'm just gonna say this now and then wrap it up. But the older people in the residential district, the R1 district currently, their biggest concern is having people that are constantly, you know, they don't know who they are. Like long-term renters, they get to know their neighbors, they feel comfortable. They don't feel safe when there's constant change of people. And then the other thing is that there's clearly multifamily residing use in a single family thing, and we've been told that can't be enforced. So those are issues that I know that are out there that we will struggle with.
So let's peel this back. So what I hear is we have a concern about the use called short-term rental.
Yes.
The law allows you to regulate that differently, and we're gonna deal with that, so we're gonna park that.
Okay.
When you have a multitude of people living in a house, you have been told correctly, because in a community that I worked in, DeSoto, Texas, I was assistant city manager and I was planning manager. We had a halfway house in our rural part of our community, and they had 32 people living there. We sued them to enforce our zoning ordinance. They in turn sued the city under the Federal Fair Housing Act. So we ended up having to go to federal court in Dallas, and I had to testify. What we used was the International Building Code, because the International Building Code treats a residential structure and its occupancy different, and it's about 10. And at 11, it becomes a commercial structure. So what the court ruled in our favor, which was stunning. People said, you're not gonna win that. Well, we went and we won.
Challenge accepted.
Yes, ma'am, batter up, baby, let's go. So we went and won. And so what happened is we could regulate that it had to be used for residential, and you could regulate the number, but you can't get into family, you can't get into who's related to who, and that's just law. It's not a battle worth fighting. So you have to use other regulations like code enforcement and other
And
things to
building
regulate
types.
that.
So I want you to recall, remember that building types go in certain place types. So you can't put certain building types that would facilitate that into certain place types. And the building types are also tied to other development standards that are going to limit that type of behavior. So someone coming in that would want to do that and say, well, you're doing a rear yard building, well, I want to do it over here. Well, sorry, you've got to do that in place type 5 only, and it only goes in these districts, and it only has to be to these standards. And with a rear yard building, you've got to pick this type of frontage. You're going to have to build your
You're
street
talking
out.
about new builds, so these are.
Or retrofits, or
These are people that are existing that.
That's right.
That,
That's a code enforcement issue. It's not
and
a
international
zoning,
building code.
it's not a zoning issue.
and
so-
it's,
so-
I mean, it's been a code enforcement issue for a while because
Yes,
the
ma'am.
permit was pulled for a garage and it's now a vacation rental, full-fledged plumbing and toilet and everything. And the
So if
the
they
neighbors
did-
are irate about it.
So if they didn't get a permit, then it should be inspected because it has failed to get a certificate of occupancy, and there's a process for that. But there has to be political will here for that to happen.
Right, and it's been brought up many times and has been, doesn't seem to be of concern, so.
But before we leave this,
I'm not trying to leave it.
okay, so at this point in time, the only use I hear that we're concerned about is short-term rental. Is that correct? Is there others?
I'm not even concerned with
Well,
short-term rental.
I'm just talking about
Short-term
We need
rental.
somewhere for people to
Residential areas.
stay when they're
Uh,
here.
We need somewhere
RVs
for people to live.
that people may be living in, alongside the house.
Okay.
That's a
We got plenty of
big
that,
concern
too.
from people I hear from.
And that's code enforcement,
Yeah.
again,
That's all code enforcement.
not
Yeah.
part of this. Mayor Pro Tem?
Okay, so I just wanted to comment on this, so the one example that Tony brought up where the garage, the permits were pulled, now it's an apartment, it's a short-term rental. And what I gathered from the meetings and from the presentation is that's something we wanna move towards allowing somewhat.
It's gonna be the next
the next
slide, I
slide.
think. So can I just go there?
You know,
Okay, this is where I get a 50-50 shot of I'm either really on point or y'all are fixing to throw things. So, here's what we had to set the stage and to give you context. In the public meetings, we talked about gentrification happening in this community. Your median annual income is about $32,000. Your median household value is about $140,000. When you do the math, that is 4 times income. If you have ever attempted to buy a house, the mortgage lenders will let you go 3 times your house value, your income. So what you have is a lot of people that are no longer able to afford to build. So what we've heard is we're getting a lot of outside investment into Bandera. People are selling because they need top dollar because they've had limited income or they just need to recoup their investment. What we then heard was we need the ability to be competitive. We need another option other than just selling our property to be able to compete and make money to compete with outside investment. So that's the framework with which we're going to present this. So it is workforce housing and it's also short-term rental. Both of those generate things this community needs.
and generational housing.
Yes, you need to be able to have workers living here. And then you need a place for your visitors because about 63% of your revenue, and we've done the math, is based on tourism. So, they need to be welcome. So what we have come up with is to allow bunkhouses. And the magic number is 600 square feet. If y'all have met Jordan that works with us, Jordan and her fiance own a 612 square foot home in New Brunswick. So when we
Mine's
talked
pretty
about
tiny, too.
this, she's the generational housing that you desperately need because you have an aging
Oh, yeah, right.
population. So if you want your young millennials who we visited with to stay in Bandera, they aren't wanting the big house. They want a place to go to sleep and they want to experience it. So what we're advocating is that every property owner that is in P2, P3, P4 would be allowed to build a bunkhouse not to exceed 600 square feet. Now, not everybody's gonna do that. So I know y'all have gone through gyrations with your previous administrators. Well, what if a fourth of the city did this? What if a half? You know, if 25 or 30 did it, could we be excited? That's 25 or 30 new opportunities for workforce housing or having a bunkhouse for short-term rental. Here's the provision we think is gonna solve the problem that y'all are wrestling with. And that is the owner has to live on site. So you're not gonna have investors come in, buy a house, and then put a bunkhouse behind it. What we don't want to say is they have to live in the primary structure, because if you're older, you may not want to keep up your house. You may want to live in that 600 square foot, rent out your big house, start getting some income that you can compete, and your only option now is not having to sell to an investor to stay here in Bandera. So in listening to what y'all said you wanted as a community, we think this is a fix. Now, we're not gonna make everybody happy, but what it does do is it gives you workforce housing, it provides short-term rental, and the short-term rental, by having the owner having to live on site, we heard, is they don't have the Bandera values. Well, now you've got somebody on site to enforce the Bandera values. Yes, Mayor?
So what if I want to keep my house, but I want to subdivide and sell the other side, build a house and sell it? Are we gonna have because minimum lot size has made
That's
a
the
lot.
next slide, Mayor. We'll get there. We anticipated that, we'll get there. But let's eat this elephant one bite at a time.
So I'm getting my, cause before we went residential, our zoning were 1 and up, but now we're reversing it. It's like it's going, so remind me what 3 and 4 are?
Place type 2 is rural, place type 3 is residential, place type 4 is the mix.
I think we're gonna get some resistance with allowing that in all of them, but I
So is
like
P4
the idea, I'm
So
not
is
shutting it.
P4 where you think
I
that we'll
think-
get the?
I think, I don't know, I mean, I'm not saying anything, I'm just trying, I've only talked to a few people.
Well,
with the
here's what we're
concern,
gonna tell you, we're gonna be surprised if you don't, because in a meeting, we asked, do you wanna be able to do this on your lot? Yes. Do you want your neighbor to do it? No, everybody said.
Right.
So it's do as I say, not as I do, we want
I
all of
want
the
everybody else to be
regulations gone.
regulated but them, yeah.
There you go, so we figured we were probably gonna have to die on this.
Yeah,
one
no,
right here.
I love the
Three,
idea
four,
and the thought behind it, I just,
Settlers.
yeah, I gotta think about that a little more.
2, 3, and 4.
I like the idea.
2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
Sorry, is that right?
Yeah. So this is.
Other
So is there a limit to how
Yeah.
many of those you
And
One.
can?
2 is just the.
5 is an actual, 5 shouldn't be on
Okay.
there.
That's what I
One.
Yeah, 2,
thought.
3, and 4.
Yeah, 2,
And the
3,
dens,
4.
I would
Okay.
be just concerned with the 600 square foot being a certain percentage of the overall lot
This
size.
is RV.
That's available
That's
to,
RV.
Right.
for the density purposes.
So
So
here's,
they could build little
here's the
bunkhouses,
context.
But they're in floodway.
It's allowed up to 600 square feet with no permission. But if you want something more than that, then they just have to come talk to you.
And so we would write that in the code, that if
Right, but so if you've got a lot and the house itself takes up, say 75% of the lot, it still meets all of the criteria and stuff, and then that 600 square feet, I mean,
Build
if
on
there's,
that land though,
you know what I'm
because
saying, I'm
it's
just like,
The
the
international
density.
building code will dictate
So I think it
separation.
well, and
Okay.
also there's
See, I'm just saying, it's not
Well,
just the
occupancy.
600 square feet,
No, you're
there'll
right.
be other
It's
factors, right?
Well, there's a development standard in there that says in place type 5, you can't go over more than 50% lot coverage.
Okay.
And so if
I don't
that's
want
taking
that.
it over
Yeah.
50% lot coverage, they couldn't build
Right, so
this
these
thing.
things are
off of here.
written
That
as a
would have
children's
to be
book
something
in
that
order,
we would-
takes priority, and, oh, by the way, you gotta check this box too.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
okay, yeah.
It's written in that manner, yes ma'am, that's correct.
Okay.
So we just thought this was a great way of trying to solve this issue, and it would provide a framework
Absolutely.
and that would
Flexibility
allow it, yes ma'am.
Increase our population.
with
You
predictability.
could put a
Yes,
tiny
ma'am.
house bed next
That's
to it.
right.
That's it.
With
Yes,
incremental,
ma'am.
gentle, pattern.
With the bunkhouses, are we excluding like modular, or are we requiring them to be on a foundation? And we're curious about why they would be in P2. Those are I think those are all RV areas, and I don't think anything could be built.
Well, it's for rural areas as well. We just didn't, if someone had some agricultural land and they wanted to build an extra house, we didn't want them to have to come ask you if they could build an extra house. And so it was for rural lands. We understand there's some areas where it wouldn't actually fit.
So I would imagine
You're
that
right
the
in those
question that-
areas, though, you can't.
I would
Correct.
imagine that the question I asked would pertain to yours too. There's other criteria. So like density, setbacks,
Lot,
international code says that the buildings have to be so far apart, have to, you know, there's for security, safety,
Health
whatever.
and safety.
And I would imagine that floodplains, floodways,
Right.
those types of
Would
things,
impact that.
I mean, all of those would take precedence
Right.
before you ever even got
Got
to the
to this.
option of, so the children's
That's
book,
correct.
chapters 1 through 2, have
Covered
already
this.
knocked you out of the park,
That's right.
and you never even got to the 600
Right.
square foot.
Right.
Well, except for, you know, even like today I was looking at, short-term rental stuff here just to see what, like I didn't know Lonesome Dove on 11th Street was a rental. I had no idea until today.
Let's not go down that road today.
But didn't know. So, but there were little RVs that you can rent for the night or whatever, which I've seen in other places, so why wouldn't that fit in there? I like that idea, so that would fit in the, you know, the
As a bunkhouse?
floodplain, cause you could haul it off.
So in lies the loopholes and the
So
and
we
taking advantage.
did not code in RV because the community was pretty clear they weren't interested.
Right.
So we didn't go there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
but
I
you still
don't
wanna
want junky
be able to
RV either.
regulate the current RV parks, and there's several of those right in
No,
town.
we
Yeah.
just mean as bunkhouse stuff.
Present
We're talking
company
about
excluded.
utilizing the RV
So,
as a
what
bunkhouse.
we haven't added is RV in your P3 because it's not allowed there now. That's what I'm talking about. As an alternative housing option in,
P3.
in P3.
that's right.
Okay.
Because that's what we heard you didn't want.
Correct.
I will
don't.
tell you, I think it's a very easy way to do it. It makes good sense, but it's a community preference, and so it doesn't matter what we think.
So if I'm not mistaken, there's something in our current ordinances that basically says you can't spend more than a 2-week consecutive
14
period,
days.
14-day period in
14
an
days
RV.
total.
It doesn't have to be
Right.
consecutive, it's just
It's
14
14
days,
days
14
annually.
days over 12 months, period.
Sure.
And so is that going away or is that staying?
So, once we get some direction from you, we'll get off in the details and figure out how to make sure
Where to put
workforce
that.
housing happens and it doesn't happen at the expense of one or the other. But we haven't gotten in there because if you tell us no, it wasn't worth the energy.
Yeah.
But a bunkhouse cannot be mobile, correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
Okay.
that's what I asked earlier about the
That's what I
foundation.
asked.
Yeah.
That's what
right.
you're
Okay.
actually getting at.
That's right. The International Building
That's
Code
cute.
will deal with modular houses and
Construction stuff, yeah.
the tiny houses because they're on wheels differently than they would an actual structure.
Okay.
For example, I mean, I'm nerd out a little bit, but if it's narrower than 9 feet and it's on a trailer, it is not considered a house. You register it with the state as a vehicle,
Right. And
regardless of it's a house. So it's outside of our purview even. So
Actually, by square footage.
by square footage, yeah.
It's 400 square foot,
That's right.
so
no more than
400.
400.
That's for a vehicle,
Okay.
house.
Okay.
Okay. Which you can't, you don't pay property tax on.
That's right.
Correct.
Yeah.
So this protects us
Once you
from
go
that
over
situation.
400 though,
Yeah.
then
Yes.
you'll be paying.
Okay.
Is this-
Yes,
Yes?
for me.
Yeah? Okay.
So here is the next question. 8,000 square feet seems pretty stout. We have argued this back and forth, and here is where we came up with. We appreciate 8,000 square feet is pretty big, and Matt's talked to you about the fact you've got some pretty small lots. So, what we recommend is 6,000 square feet, and the reason for that is if you got an 8,000 square foot house, Mayor, and you wanted to subdivide it, you got to have 6,000 square feet. Well, the other 2,000 is now non-conforming and you won't approve it. So what that requires is for somebody to come in and buy 3 lots to be able to get to 4. what's the likelihood that's gonna happen? So, because at 3 lots, that's 24,000, you could then divide it by 6,000 and get 4 lots, so you're gonna go to an awful lot of effort to pick up 1 lot.
What happened in Austin is Hyde Park is platted where when you buy a lot, when you buy a house, you're actually buying 2 25-foot lots. What happened is investors saw that, they came in and tore all of those
I
little
was just gonna
craftsman
say, I
houses
live in a
down.
neighborhood that encourages that.
Because it's equitable lots, and if we made this 4,000, that is telling them, take this house down and turn that into 4. And so now you're gonna get 2, your subdivisions are gonna become, the numbers would work where they would subdivide it into 2 4,000 square foot lots, take that house down, build 2 houses, and your character starts to change. We were very mindful, because this is where I was like, hold on, we're not coding Bandera. Wait a minute, we're making arbitrary numbers here. But I'm gonna come back to, because you have many 4,000 square foot lots in town, and it probably was where they got that, and that started to happen, where someone sold half of their lot. This is a community decision, but 6,000 would prohibit that, and it makes it to where you have to buy multiple to have that investment work. We don't think that the market is here to do that, and so we're trying to offset in that market.
I'm telling you, the market probably is here to do that,
Yeah?
to buy multiple lots and demo houses instead of renovate them. And
That's-
yes, it is.
What do y'all
I'm
think?
sure.
I'm
That's
pretty
nuts.
sure.
So
Does
Like the other
6,000 bring
towns
you peace
where
of mind,
it's
or
occurred.
you wanna
Yeah.
stay at 8,000?
I don't know, I'd need to think about it. but-
What's the split now, and I know there's a different number for duplexes versus splitting the lot of single family, what is that, do you remember?
I don't know off the top of my head, Mason.
Yeah, I know there's a different number for duplex than there is.
it's larger, I think duplex was 12,000 square foot lot. Is that right, Keely?
I'd have to look it up.
I think it is, I think it was 12,000.
She's back there going, God, they're about to look at me.
That's what the duplexes is enough for me to remember.
Yeah, but I think you're correct, and yeah, that was the intent with
Okay.
this, but this, we understand this is
Yeah,
a big
because
question.
I did, I
It
lived in
is.
a little neighborhood in New Braunfels that had beautiful little houses, they were, it was built in a pecan grove, and the tiny houses were built as weekend houses from people from Houston that would come and enjoy the river. It was along the side of the river, and they were 25 by 75 foot lots, and you had to have a minimum of 2 in order to build. And so that's what started happening right before I left, was that I actually had 3 lots, and I had crazy things happen.
Our thought with this is, if it started to happen and y'all saw it happening, then you go and change your lots back to 8,000. If it becomes a real issue and you see it happening, you go modify your code, put 8,000 back in, and squash it.
The lot right across from you, Tony, that we looked at was just shy of being able to split it in 2. But then they re-surveyed it, and I think it ended up being big enough to split it in 2.
Maybe.
So, when
That's
you
interesting.
when you compare the minimum lot size requirement to what we actually have on the ground, what do you find?
You got lots way smaller than
Yeah,
8,000 square
Right.
feet.
And I just want to
Right.
state, this is for P3. I should have prefaced, this slide needs to state for P3 only. This is where this is P3.
This is your residential integrity of protecting your neighborhood.
Yes, this is mainly the settlers district, those areas, P3, but I'm gonna say, you have a lot of 8,000 square foot lots, a whole lot of them. And it is your predominant lot pattern that you have, but there are smaller ones. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I don't work in real estate, and I don't know how Tony knows square footage and what it looks like and all that. I have no idea what 8,000 square feet looks like.
Is that the
So,
0.316 acre
It
lots?
is, yeah. It's what most of your lots in your residential, those are generally about 8,000 square feet.
Most of our
tall.
blocks are 4 of those.
Yep.
Four
Or
rectangles.
6?
It's 4.
okay, I have a third of an
Like-
acre.
Mine is
75
How big is that?
by
You've
100,
got more cut out.
80 by
80 by
100.
100.
Oh,
Or
wait, no, there's 8.
70 by,
There's 8 of
that's
them.
my lot,
110.
and that's a third
There's 8 per block.
of an
But,
acre.
That's
per block
this
face, there's-
block.
Per block face, there's 4.
yeah, that's
See,
right.
so 1, 2,
So
3, 4.
Darcy, the concern
have
would be
one
is,
row.
5,
they would
6,
get
7,
those
8.
8 houses
That's
and
one
turn
whole
into
block.
16 if we
Right,
did
this
this in
is,
an
but this
equal
is,
divide.
it's
That
like
someone could
Oh,
come
okay,
in,
that's
some
what-
investor
4
comes to
pieces.
town.
Yeah.
See,
and
so.
I get
I see
that
what
part,
you're
but
saying.
I
so
just,
here's
I,
mine.
I
there's
can't
Harris's
picture
house.
how big
That's where Kirsten
Oh, I
lives.
see.
8,000 square
That's
feet.
Pat, that's the parking lot,
So,
that's my house, that's the house on the
80
corner.
by 100.
To see that. And then-
I mean, there's a technical question for the audience.
Where's
That's
Shell's
not
got her
eight
down?
thousand.
Let's
No,
keep this to a
wasn't
minimum,
this?
because we'll have an
Mine is
opportunity
8,000.
to speak with them in a public forum,
That's what-
so just
that's
a
what I
question
just
or
had,
two.
point
We'll
three
go
one
We'll
forward.
be
six.
back on September 2nd to have a community
4 of
conversation.
them.
But you said a question or two, so she
Yeah,
can.
let's have a
go-
question or
No,
two.
I
There's
remember us sitting here many nights talking about, trying to get more, how do we get more income and property taxes and that sort of thing. So is there an opportunity somewhere in our P3 to allow
Smaller lot
division
sizes.
and more homes to be built, therefore building the property tax payments to the city?
We think that that takes a real special analysis to determine where that would happen. So you could start to really analyze these areas where you may have that opportunity based off of topography, based off of building patterns. I do think this is a blanket approach. We can appreciate that it is because of the
Right.
magnitude of it.
Isn't that the
But
square feet
knowing
per acre?
that majority of the lots are
Yes.
8,000 square feet, we originally came in, we were gonna recommend 4,000. When we started to really understand what problems that could cause for you all, that's where we would say
And like
it's
infrastructure also and things like that?
it's doubling your density. It would double, quadruple your density, which is
sure,
a
but-
strain on your services. 4,000 square foot lot is a very good residential lot size. It's what we would generally recommend, and when we really saw what the possibilities could be, particularly now hearing that y'all believe that the market is here to do that, it really gives me heartburn to
And
recommend
Rochelle, the
that.
other thing we had to temper this with was the community didn't wanna change and didn't wanna grow. So we didn't step out there to do that. If y'all choose to do that, that's certainly a community decision, but what we're hearing is that's not the case. So what we did hear was that the community wanted some flexibility other than 8. So 4 seemed to create a whole lot of change you weren't interested in. 6, they gotta work for it.
That's,
And 5 gets you junky.
that's way too small.
Just, yeah.
Those 4,000 square foot lots that you're referring to here in town, give me a rough dimension on them.
They're generally 40 by 100.
Really?
Yes, sir.
Ouch.
Okay, well, I think that's something for us to think
Yeah.
about.
Okay, and yeah, so
That
we'll
could
leave
be a
this on the
whole
table.
separate workshop.
Okay.
Okay.
Here is something that you don't see, in Bandera, if you do, we're not tripping over it. And it's the only thing that we have just outlawed out of the code, and they're called snout houses. And that's the garages out front. It seems very un-Banderish. You don't have many garages, and if you do, they are behind the property line.
Or side loaded.
Our side, and that
Mine's out front.
forces the community to engage from
Yeah.
a neighborly
Really detached though.
standpoint. So when you ride up and down the street,
True.
you're not seeing this tunnel vision of driveways that are short with garages. It just, to keep Bandera, this isn't it.
It's just fun that every time y'all bring up an example, there's probably a council person that has that's the mold.
But no, Christine said, but mine's detached.
Hers is detached.
So it's not
It is.
like
Yeah.
that.
And we were talking about RVs earlier, so I just, it's like.
Every time we
Yeah, I have
step
one of
up,
those
we
in my
know we're gonna
backyard.
start
One of hers in
somebody.
her yard.
No one lives in it, but I have one in my
So
backyard.
is that something y'all are willing to code out, or you want to say no?
Well, and
Or do
Rebecca
like
has to move.
This is where it's.
She can live in my RV.
Yeah.
Side loads, I mean, so.
Yeah.
Well, how many people have enclosed garages around here? I mean, is that pretty standard?
No,
How many want them though?
There's not too many,
No.
no.
mostly carports.
Where
There are some,
I would love
and
to
there's
have a
some,
garage.
there's some in
my
the newer
God.
development, like up by Silver Sage, that's considered
Yeah,
homes
but
in the city.
everywhere else, it's rare, right?
It is rare, it's rare in the older houses, there's not many.
But like, say you wanted to enclose your carport, would that be allowed? Then in that case,
You can enclose a carport. Is it
it's attached to the house.
Is it in the front or the
That's
side?
the
This
key.
is-
Is it in the front?
Yeah.
It's on the side.
Then it's
Okay.
not a
Right?
snout house.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
These are where the garage protrudes out in the back, the front door is back behind it.
You have to walk along the side of the garage to
That's
get
my
to the
house.
door, yeah.
But it's not attached.
It's not attached.
Right.
Yeah, but some of them you just walk, 4 or 5 feet.
Yeah.
So
I
we-
would say
we-
as a general rule, we would not want that. I would say. as a
So
general-
if
I
somebody
would agree.
wanted it, all we're saying by not allowing it, the
Yeah.
code is they gotta come have a conversation with you.
That's it.
What's it gonna look like, right?
That's right, and if they can fix it architecturally where it meets the flavor of the community, then you have the right to say yes.
And they may have a unique issue with their lot or something
That's
that
what I was
requires
gonna
it,
say,
but
too.
yeah,
That's right.
so.
This would trigger a conversation,
A corner
basically.
lot or
Triggering a
whatever.
conversation is where we wanna go.
Don't
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
So this is a really important conversation. All of this today has been built around the perspective of protect the natural setting. We've also heard the importance of having walkability, building trails, incorporating places for horses to walk. And we struggle with your TxDOT roadways. After our first meeting
We
with the
do too.
community, we went and met with the area engineer, who invited the former area engineer. And TxDOT, and this is me with my former city manager hat on, so I'm gonna editorialize a minute. TxDOT has a Bible. And the Dallas division of TxDOT will beat you up with that Bible. Well, we met the TxDOT Bible in Kerrville at the TxDOT office. They are not particularly open with modifying the walkways and the transportation along Highway 16. It can be done. It will be a challenge. It will be a battle. It could be done. So we kind of park that and then begin to wrap our mind around the river. So what we are proposing is that the council would encourage and work toward a 200-foot buffer on either side of the river that would be a riparian zone. It's in the floodway. It has really no value because in the floodway, FEMA's going to prevent you from building. So what that would then provide you is the ability to apply for grants on a federal scale that would allow you to do trails. It would allow you to do erosion control. And it would be absolutely fabulous as a community because you could go from one end of town to the other end of the town utilizing the river by doing that. Yes, ma'am.
You're saying both sides of the river?
If you have,
That's the ETJ over there.
okay, well, you may choose as a community to just do the city limits. That would make better sense.
You do have the
Are
ability
you
to
talk-
enforce environmental regulations in your ETJ, and this could be seen as an environmental tool for bank stabilization. Just as a quick story, when we were in San Marcos, I was the director there, we got a $65 million grant for bank stabilization to stabilize the banks along the San Marcos River. Well, we built a trail on top of it, and we lined the entire river with a trail out of that $65 million grant. This is a great opportunity for y'all to accomplish this great river trail that links the whole community. You can be on one part of the trail, split the grid, cut to the other part of the trail. I mean, it is a wonderful feature from multiple perspectives.
And it becomes a transportation network you control.
And it also will protect your natural setting. I mean, preserving the banks of the Medina River is fundamentally important. We've studied this from a 100-foot buffer to a 150-foot buffer to a 200-foot buffer. All of it's within the floodway and the floodplains, and so it's not getting out on any properties. Furthermore, we believe there's only one or two properties that would influence this. Most of it is there's one property in Airbnb on the southern side of Bricks that we think that may, it gets narrow there, but that's the only property we see issues with. Everything else is clean. We've studied the maps. It looks like it is totally doable at a 200-foot buffer range.
So what does stabilizing the banks of the river entail? Are we talking
Riparian
cement?
grow zones.
It's
I
really,
know, but-
There's where we've had the problems in the past, they have a difference.
It could,
Yeah, I just
it could be grow zones, it could be laydown areas where you have a chain of ponds for stormwater cleaning before it goes into the river. It could be areas where bank erosion's happening and you stabilize that erosion with
So it's all
limestone
natural
blocks.
stabilization.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because when
Yeah.
you were talking about the walking path on top and, you know, every time somebody brings up, you know, the fact that Kerrville along the Guadalupe has all those cement walking paths and they're so fabulous. And I'm like, okay,
I
every
would
time a
put-
flood comes along,
Right.
we're gonna end up like, I mean, there
frustrated.
goes the millions of dollars of grants downriver. So I see what you're saying, yeah, natural,
It
okay.
could be any,
I mean, I see riparian zone as a natural thing, but when you start talking about stabilizing the river and the, yeah, it was.
so words matter. We're not advocating that you do it everywhere, but there could be places in the bend of the river or where you have some infrastructure where erosion's happening.
Right.
And you might want to put up a gabion wall to protect your infrastructure. Well, if you had a riparian zone, you could do that.
Right. Okay,
So,
interesting.
is that a good or a
Just thinking
Okay,
about the repercussions,
Lots of new.
good and bad.
yes.
Good and
That's a
bad.
long-
And that 200-foot zone that you're talking about,
That's gotta
where,
be private
give me an
property.
example of like, where are you talking about putting that?
Literally, from one end of town to the other,
Okay?
in the floodway.
So
Yeah,
the
so what
inside,
happens
inside, the
with the
inside,
people that own,
the city owns
say,
most of it.
property on that?
So here is where it would take some community buy-in. My argument to them would be, it's the most important asset you've got. It's where it all started. And so by ensuring that you have an easement, and that's really what you're asking for, is an easement, you would then be able to have a public reason for being there. So again, it gives you the governmental authority to do things like apply for grants, because now you can prove that you have access to this and there is a ability to protect the bank. There could be some, as he said, some planting ponds, because it's interesting to me that your water district feels compelled to tell people to not swim or fish. So you've got some water quality issues, so that would give you an opportunity to begin to treat those kinds of things. So there's a lot of reasons why you could do it, and today, you can't do any of it because you gotta get everybody in agreement. And honestly, I'm gonna tell you this because I've been doing this a long time. This may take you 10 or 15 years to accomplish. You may have some property owners today that say no, but the next time that property turns over 10, 15, 20 years
You're
from
knocking
now.
on the door every time the property turns.
That's right. And over a period of time, you'll wake up one day and they'll be applauding y'all for the vision that put it together. So we're not at any way advocating this is a miracle that will happen tomorrow. But it's a vision, it's beginning to plant the seeds, and over time, it's a goal that you work toward.
And would that be purchased land, or what would be your ideal?
It really just ought to be an easement.
Yeah, just grant easements across
Yeah.
the property.
And
And
they're
it's in
just
the
granting-
floodway most of the way, it's all floodway, unbuildable.
That you're not taking anything from them because it's
Right.
land they can't use.
We just think
Well,
that this
it's
could
their
be-
river access.
The river access.
Yeah.
Well, at that point in time, you're
Still
not,
have access.
so it is the private access, and that is where you're going to have the rub. And that's why I say it may take decades for it to happen, you know, it
But the
just.
inside, the majority of it from First Street all the way to the bridge, the city owns it.
There's a significant
On the-
parts, and yeah, it could be a start.
So it's a goal to
So
work
it, I
toward.
mean, so it could be started as an example, and then the people, the private property, we could just say, you too could have this.
And Bastrop attempted to put sidewalks downtown, and it took them 12 years to get it done. So.
And it's
and
beautiful.
And it was 2
And,
blocks.
You don't think
So
that's
sometimes it
achievable
just takes
here?
time.
We're gonna
I'm
get
sorry?
to the
What's
next
the
slide.
That was not. Got like premonition working with you.
So let me ask this, appreciating the challenges and the rub with, it's our private property, we want people behind our house. Is this something y'all are interested in, putting in? It's a goal to work toward, there's not gonna be a mandate about this, we're just planting seeds. And sometimes olive trees take, 50 years to bloom, so.
I have a little question, and I'm trying to figure out how to ask this, but I remember hearing something about how creating this the river easement and buffer can potentially extend the ETJ. Is there annexation along the river happening, or maybe that was
I mean,
before the last legislative
yeah,
session?
What
You're
we
not
did-
annexing
You're not
anything,
annexing.
ma'am.
Yeah, annexation is
Rebecca, what
awful.
that was is we, at one point, we could have annexed the river, which would have given us,
Strip annexation.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking of. So this is just an easement
in
to
granted.
potential, okay, okay.
It's a vision.
Would that have kept people from shooting at us?
it's not an invisible shield.
No, we do had them shoot at us more.
So here is where we would like to end.
This is the next line. We have there's 2 more slides and then we're done.
This is
Tony.
where we,
Matt, stay the course, stay the course.
Tony.
we want to end the comp plan on an action plan. And this is where I will tell you that we had the biggest paradigm shift. Every comp plan that I've ever read is this wonderful vision, and it's this laundry list of everything that's wrong in a community that you can come up with. And you read the action plan in the back, and it's just overwhelming. And as city manager, I think, there's no way in the world, we just don't have the money for that. So, we believe y'all are realistic people, and you
Why are
deal
you
in,
looking at me?
and you deal in realism. Well, the truth of the matter is you've got significant wastewater challenges that you as a community are dealing with. You live in an aquifer that's rather large, and it is not recharging, and you don't know how long it's gonna last and where you're gonna get water when it runs out. Drainage is a problem because at some point in time, we started building parking lots for cars, and we've created some real drainage challenges that y'all are now addressing. And I think we can all agree that when this city gets through dealing with wastewater, water, and drainage, you're maxed out from a debt capacity, and you're gonna be there a long time. So there's no point in building this long laundry list of things y'all are just never gonna get to. So we're just not. So our top action items are, if you can't flush your toilet, you can't turn on your water, and you're drowning every time it rains, y'all have failed your mission as a city. So you need to start there. That's where you're focused, and we applaud you hugely. Adopting the Bandera building block code, there are pool bets all over town saying you won't do it. Prove them wrong. Put this back and let this be a victory for change for this community. That's a huge action plan. Beginning to implement that makes a huge, huge statement.
That keeps Bandera.
Bandera, amen. Workforce housing, we'll go back and we'll vet bunk housing, but if you let bunk houses be built, if 20 or 30 of them get built, that's 20 or 30 houses you haven't had in a very long time. That offers a lot of options then to a workforce. It allows your aging population to have choices about where they live and how they stay and manage their investment. That's a victory. The old jail plan, it comes with what we're going to call low-tech, bite-sized incremental pieces. The county owns some property, the city owns some property, we have some private property owners, and we want to build a plan so when somebody can do something, they do it. And it may take 5 or 10 years, but you're working toward an action plan that doesn't have to be millions of dollars. It can be small investments, it can be volunteer projects to help create a vision so that whoever the players are can play when they have the energy or the money to do so. We think having a cohesive Main Street from the river to North Main is important. But we also recognize the last comp plan you had a plan in there too. And so there's some real challenges with it. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't, but we have heard that's an interest, so we're going to put that in there. And then the riparian buffer that we have posed. And that's all that we are going to suggest. We'll put some wayfinding signs, they won't be big deals, but we're not coming back at y'all with this huge laundry list. You don't want to change, your community's been abundantly clear. So what we've tried to hear are the things that y'all can agree are issues, and that's your workforce housing. You want walkability, you want to be able to have some paths, and so we've listened, we've tried to hear you, not overwhelm you, set you up for success so you can celebrate the victories that matter. So 10, 15, 20 years you can look back and say, we really made a difference. So are y'all comfortable with that approach?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And the next two slides are just the illustrations that we've done for the old jail plan, showing the incremental bite-sized pieces. You could do brick sills for the street and incrementally build out that brick street. You could, work with the landowners to build a plaza. The county could do remodeling of the jail. It could be a jail plaza right in front of the old city hall and jail.
There is actually a splash pad, and in Bastrop, we got a splash pad because a group of people did a GoFundMe page and they raised money for the splash pad, and the city put it in. So there are all sorts of small projects that could happen on a basis. And again, it may take 5-10 years, but every year something happens, and over time that vision becomes reality.
So I want to be clear that the old jail plan is the county's, and I know we own some of the property, and I know it will be a joint effort, and it is in the city, but I don't want the paper going off and stepping on the judge's feet, and then all of a sudden we have more rift between the city.
Okay, so
More rift between the city and the county, and acting like we're overstepping.
So we've had a meeting with the judge, and we've showed the judge this. So we are not dictating anything to the judge. So the old jail part of that will be what the county chooses to do with their architect, and all of this fits around it. So the county will do what the county wants to do on its plan.
I know, but I'm just saying, I just want the audience that leave me here, we are not planning to do anything. It is in the judge's hands. We're at the mercy of the judge. And although
you can plan everything around the county property.
Yes,
You've
we
got
can.
property owners that get to do what they want to do,
Yes, we
and
can.
it doesn't matter
But
what the judge
The
thinks.
use
So
of the term old jail, I just want to make sure everybody's clear that we're not overstepping.
That's a really good point, and maybe that's not their appropriate term for this.
It's accurate in what this context is, and that is the area. And I think that helps everybody, but I don't want anybody thinking that we are,
Gonna renovate the jail.
we're trying to overstep
Absolutely.
his
Yes, ma'am.
jurisdiction.
We believe this could be the great family-friendly element that also lands the corner of Main Street. Right now, it falls apart. This is where you can do some corner treatments and treat that intersection on the corner that creates this draw down in this district, and then it becomes this wonderful little area where the families can go and hang out. We think it's a great opportunity. We understand all of the nuances that go
So
along
I'm
with it.
gonna put one little kink in here, not kink, but a thing that we've been working on with the historic district. We just got approved for the Tin Man and the plaza, the piece of land, the little building underneath the water tower, the old water tower. It was approved to be designated as a historical marker, and so that application. It's still in the phase, we don't know what, but there's an opportunity for doing something with that area. But I just
Maybe a
thought I'd throw that out
small
there.
area plan there too.
It's a very small area, it's over there by the parking lots and stuff, but that might be a small.
Yeah, I'd like to see something similar to the jail done there at the Tin Man.
Yeah.
Something that would actually draw people there.
Yeah, that would be
benches,
it's
nice
a small
little
piece of property, it might
setting.
be a small win.
And it's right behind all those dumpsters.
Yeah. Super attractive.
Yeah, green.
All those
And
dumpsters.
here's what I do know is it doesn't take much change to generate positive change. Sometimes it's just one or two people doing something that causes others to step up.
Well, we
And the
saw
last
that one
slide
with
we
the
have is Main Street. We are going to put this in, but we appreciate that it is going to require a lot of energy. And so what we're going to say to you is all of the building regulations that you've adopted with this, over time, will just cause this to happen just by virtue of the regulations.
And so what we're
It's a
doing,
vision board.
it's a vision
Yes,
board.
there you go.
So what we're
There you
doing
go.
here is we drew out, we studied and drew each element that exists now. And what you'll notice is that each block varies in the frontage. So the public frontage out front varies block by block. We're trying really hard to create a series of frontage standards that would work block by block for y'all. That's what we're trying to do. And so we came back in and started studying where those interfaces are, and that's what you'll see on the bottom. Those are the opportunity zones where that definition can be really defined to create this uniformity of the cohesive walkable environment. So those are the areas. We're going to write a very specific item for this, but we also appreciate that this is a long-term plan as well.
It's just gonna take time. That concludes our presentation, so did we get close?
Yes, ma'am. A lot to think about, a lot of great ideas.
So at this point in time, we've got what we need now to finalize the plan, and we appreciate you not derailing us and going, oh no. Hopefully, by the end of next week, we'll have a draft, to you, for you to look at. We will be back on September 2nd to have a community conversation, and begin to introduce that. On October 1, we will be sending out property notifications to all property owners about this. It's the same in every community. People have not been listening, and they don't care until it's their ox being gored in the ditch. So we're gonna go gore everybody's oxes, and we hope to meet them. We are going to have 2 meetings, with planning and zoning. We're gonna walk through a detailed process so that the public really understands all of the elements, and then we'll hold a public hearing with them. And then it will come to council for its 2 readings. What you can anticipate is that the notice will go out. The first meeting will be that planning and zoning meeting where we have detailed discussions, and we will identify the property owners, and we'll work with staff to figure out their concerns. I will tell you, every time I've ever done this, there are always the things that we couldn't have seen, couldn't have planned for, and we will bring back potential solutions if there are mitigating ways we can fix them, so that you're not blindsided. But if they wait until they come to council to talk to you, we can't help them. So we're gonna encourage people to come and participate in the process.
All right, folks, it's been a long evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Split that into
Ma'am.
4.
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, do you have a second?
Yes, second. All in favor?
Discussion, all in favor? All in favor, 819.
We're out.
So you